Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Electric Underground Podcast / video cast. And I'm very excited to be joined by a special guest. And some of you may already be typing in the comments, why am I doing a video on Super Smash Bros. Melee? What madness is this? Well, if you all are OG tuners into the channel, you know that previous to me doing a bunch of videos about shmups, I played Melee. I would say, I guess, semi-competitively. I played 2,000 matches in Anther's Ladder, and I went to locals, and I was pretty in it. I was pretty thick in it, and so I've been really excited to talk to someone about the game for quite a while, and I have got a very special guest, Mr. Crimson Blur. Welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you, man. It's super random. I think I made a YouTube comment because I've been trying to learn shmups. I have like this list that I'm trying to get through of like 1cc's. And so, of course, I came across your channel, and I learned you're a God gamer. And I think God gamers gotta stick together. People with good taste, men of taste, and women of taste, any of taste. If you have taste, I like you. And, I'm just really excited to be here. And, talking Melee is always fun.
Blur, I think, knows this because I said this in the comment, but I'm actually an OG listener of his show. He had a podcast. He's still, I think it's somewhat inactive now, but he had a podcast called The Commentator's Curse. And by damn, who was listening to every single episode and commenting every single episode? It was myself. So I was very excited to, have the connection, have the crossover between the two, because I think it's really cool. So I came across your stuff in the past. You've come across my stuff. The internet is a magical place, and two have come together. So to begin with, I wanted to give Blur and everyone else a little introduction into how I came across him, because it's always kind of fascinating how people come across you online. And I think my way of coming across him is quite unique, so I thought he might enjoy this story, which is that many years ago, around 2012, when I was first getting into Melee, I'm not a social media guy. I was not plugged into the Twitterverse or social media or anything like that. I actually learned Melee through game facts and watching random YouTube videos back in the day. And so one day I was like, wouldn't it be cool if there was a podcast about Melee? So I just, in iTunes, found a podcast about Melee, which was Melee'd on Me. I have no idea who these people were. I was just listening along episode by episode. And I'm like, oh, this is a pretty cool show. And then there's this one episode where he's taking in guest callers. And one of the guest callers is the Crimson Blur. And he calls in the main host, Bobby Scar. He calls into the main host, Bobby Scar, and he's telling him about this project that he's putting together about saving all these CRTs and having all these CRTs stored away for a tournament. And the entire episode, everyone's like, this CRT guy, are you serious?
Oh, Crimson Blur just ruined everything. Oh, I'm so upset. All right, we're ending the show.
You turned your camera on.
I did not. It's right here. It's on. It's because he called me and then it got confused. Hanging up on him. We'll talk to you next time, Crimson Blur. Thank you for considering coming on. Messed up my camera and everything.
Me on the other end of that line, I'm like, oh my God, he's completely right. Guys, you don't get it how important CRTs are. And like, I was a big CRT enthusiast myself. So that immediately stood out to me in my mind. And so, yeah, ever since that point, I was like, this guy's based. This guy knows what's up. And didn't they end up needing your CRTs later on?
We actually did it, yeah. So that wasn't just some empty talk. We ended up gathering like over 100 CRTs. We got them all stored, put in a big storage. All the big tournaments used them for many years. Red Bull actually was like shipped them around, like so like Evos, like all those tournaments, MLG Evo, all those events used the CRTs that project came up with. I ended up learning a lot about displays in the process. I ended up becoming like a community's one of the more like the knowledge bearers of like what's a good CRT and what's the one we want to go after. It was a big project. But
so I don't know if people know this. My channel is comprised of CRT enthusiasts. I mean, these people are CRT people to the max. Shmup players specifically love CRTs and cherish them, I think, in a way that not other gaming audiences quite do. So what is your recommendation? What's the winner chicken dinner? Is it the Sony Trinitron? Because that's my favorite.
So it depends is the answer. If you're at home and you just want the best video quality, the PVMs, the Sony PVMs are what I'd recommend. Those are expensive and they're usually small. It's very hard to find find ones bigger than 19 inches. So Trinitrons are really good because they're pretty durable. So for our events, we have to put them in trucks and travel across the country with them. And PVMs break much more easily, and of course they're more expensive.
I have a 32-inch Sony Trinitron. I had to get me and my brothers to carry that up a staircase, and they're still like, dude, I'm not carrying that back down. You're going to have to throw that down the staircase. And I guess I'm not moving then, because they are monsters to move around.
Yeah.
So who is the poor soul who has to carry these CRTs and load them into trucks? Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a team effort. I don't do that anymore. Nowadays, there's this company called Gaming Generations, which sources most fighting game tournaments. They have like this big storage, which they haul around, and they basically contract out to events, and they have a bunch of guys that do it. But we don't take 32-inch CRTs anymore, like at any event. That's just way too big. That's like 250 pounds. Like it's extremely large.
It's impossible to move. I took it to one tournament, and I had to get everyone at the local to come carry the CRT. I'm like, guys, I have the CRT. You all have to help me carry it, though. It was sick, though. It was like playing Melee on such a big CRT is, I think, a pretty different experience, because especially like Dreamland, you're like, this stage is giant. It feels so huge on that big CRT. But I can imagine running a tournament with that. No, you're probably doing like 19 inches, right, for tournaments?
We usually do at max like 24. Sometimes you see a 27-inch CRT if someone really wants to. But like 20, something like that is fine. Like people can play it just fine. And then, when you go really lower than like 17, that's when it's pretty bad.
A local out of my region, but I had to travel there. So I was like, okay, this better be legit, because I drove 2 hours here. And all of their CRTs were like these tiny little like 13, 15 inches. I was like, oh, come on, guys.
You just can't see at that point. You can't see anything.
It's like we're doing elbow meta against each other because we're both so close to the TV. It's like, oh, you're going to try to up smash me? Bam, bitch.
Yeah.
I'll just smack the controller with my elbow.
A common mistake people make about CRTs is they think that like HD CRTs are good. It's a very common. Those are actually, like, they're like, oh, those are the newest ones. They came out like 07, like near the end of like when CRTs were useful. Those have a lot of input lag. Do not never get suckered into buying an HD CRT. Those are like the worst ones. Please don't do it. Don't do it to yourself.
So not the Trini then. So you're saying Trini's not the winner?
No, I think for tournaments, Trinitron is the winner. I think that's the highest. Just because the durability. The durability is just so much more. I say like if you're just like a retro collector and you want to like have one TV and it does all your like retro systems, I'd say try to get a big PVM if you can, like a 19-inch, and that'll be the best quality. But honestly, even for those people, Trinitrons are great because you can rely on them still working 10 years from now. Whereas a PVM might break. Trinitrons are just insanely durable. Like the fact they still work now is kind of crazy.
Yes. And so I just really appreciated you during that episode, because I think, here's my first hot take, being a CRT enthusiast is, so Melee for a very long time was highly dependent on the good old CRT television for the tournament standard. That was the common way of talking about it. I was quite surprised when I started attending Melee events how careless most Melee players were around CRTs, and how they I felt like took them for granted quite a bit. Like I would go over to the locals and stuff, and there's famous examples of people like hitting CRTs. I've seen some wild stuff with that kind of stuff, and I'm like, guys, you got to be more respectful of these. So I definitely, in that famous video where Hitbox is slapping your CRT, everyone's like memeing about that. I'm like, all right, who's this E-celeb slapping this guy's CRT? Because yeah, you don't do that, man. If you showed up to a shmup event and you slap someone's CRT, you're gone. You're out of there, buddy.
I was mad, and people are like, oh, it's just a 20-year-old TV. Why are you mad? I'm like, I have to replace that. Like I have to go and find a new one and replace it in the vault. I don't want to do that. Like that's not fun. Those things are pretty fragile. Like you put a little magnet moves, and all of a sudden the video quality is bad forever, and it's like really hard to fix.
And also repairing them. There was
Really
a day
hard.
where I was like, okay, I'm going to repair a CRT, and I'm looking up guides. It's like, yeah, possible chances of death. Make sure you don't get shocked to death by the thing. And I'm like, oh, this is terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, no, you can't find people to repair them. They're no longer manufactured, so do not take the CRT for granted, people.
It's true. They won't last forever. There are actually some, like, if you go to, like, some Chinese websites, basically, there are some new CRTs manufactured, so it's still kind of possible. But in the U.S., it's generally not allowed, I'm fairly sure. So, like, they don't want, like, copper and stuff to be used for those purposes, like, for those old monitors. It's just not smart.
So when you called in, it must have been around 2013 or 2012 when you called in. And at that time, it was still somewhat reasonable to be able to mass together bunches of CRTs. But now, 2023, they've gotten so expensive and so scarce. And if people, basically what happened is where I used to get all my CRTs was like, you know, thrift shops and Goodwills and Salvation Armies. One day there must have been a memo sent to these places where like, destroy every CRT you see on site. Yeah, a lot of these places now just destroy them. They'll send them off to recyclers or whatever and stuff. So now, like sourcing that many CRTs now, I bet would be quite the project. And then the people who know they're valuable like charge you $300 or something. So it's crazy.
What's even harder is it's not you can't do it in bulk. So when we do try to get a big vault of them, we have to do it through like Craigslist or one by one. We have to get them. We have to go to like literally like someone's grandma's house and take their CRT and use it as a community effort. Like that's what it takes because recycling centers won't give them to you. They're like, actually, no, we don't want to give you these. We're supposed to destroy them, right? So you can't walk into a recycling center and be like, hey, all those ones that you're about to destroy, I want to buy them off you. That they won't give it to you. So, yeah.
FCC or someone will come in and find them. Who knows what will happen if they do that? Yeah, they're marked for death. So that was just funny. So I was like, oh, this guy is hella based. So I was actually quite a fan of you from early on from that podcast. So I think that might be kind of
What's
a funny way someone comes across you because I'm assuming it's somewhat unusual.
I know Chillin. I grew up with Chillin. I know his family.
Here we go.
You know, he's a good friend of mine.
Hey,
You took showers with him?
Chillin dude is a good friend of mine. And boy, oh boy, he was not ready for that moment. All I wanted to do was give him a hug after, but I didn't want to intrude. I just wanted to kind of let him go outside, have his moment. I know it was a rough time. I know that like the next time, actually this will last for years. He's never gonna be able to escape it. The next time he does anything, he enters a stream chat. He talks to anyone. He goes to a tournament. Some kid, some Melvin behind his keyboard is gonna make a joke about this. They're gonna think they're so witty, so rich, so witty about it too. That's where my fear for him comes, and that's as a friend I can only relate, and I feel sorry about it, and I'm sad that his came to a greater audience for it. But boy, was it painful. Boy, was it rough. Boy, was it bad.
Oh, man, that was
Well,
down.
he had a chance to walk away with the game. I think it was game 2 on Fountain.
Game 2 specifically, yeah.
Like, I think they both just squandered like 3 opportunities in a row, and Leffen just happened to clutch it out.
Yeah.
Dude, he had a dash attack to a jump cancel up smash. And you know, the way I look at it, if he got that, you never know. It could be 5-1 in his favor, right?
Whoa.
No.
Hey. You never
Whoa.
know.
What's interesting though is I feel like both retro gaming and Melee and a lot of competitive gaming is moving away from CRTs, even our spheres, because Melee is now basically a PC game. Like it has been for now a long time, and you're seeing even local tournaments use monitors. And then you see in the retro space, people use frame meisters. You're seeing FPGA consoles become so much more popular as the main way to play. Software emulation keeps getting better and better and more accurate. So I think like the CRTs just need to last just long enough to like get us to the point where maybe that stuff becomes more playable. Still to this day, it's not better than just playing on CRT. Still, that's the best way if you want the most accurate way.
I imagine what's going to happen is that at the local level, and you'll see this at locals, like PC has already taken over. So if you go to a local now, I bet a lot of people are running it off of PC and running it off of emulation and stuff like that. But I'm assuming if you're running a national or if you're running a major, you know, you can't be emulating the game that openly. So I think those are probably more of the cases where they're going to be like, all right, let's call gaming generations. We need this damn CRTs. You know what's funny was the other day I was watching like some kind of Smash tournament. I think it was like a Texas one. And they were playing Melee on a GameCube, on a CRT, and everyone was in their default skins. I was like, oh, isn't that nostalgic? You remember when people played Melee on default settings, on default skins on GameCubes? Like, remember those days? Like, I saw Falco with his green jacket. I'm like, oh my God. And Pokemon Stadium transforming. Yeah, Melee has absolutely become a totally different game now. It's crazy.
It's a whole different beast. I think most of the people playing now at this point are PC gamers. Like, the way, if you just look at the statistics on the people who play the game, most of them came in during the era of online net play. Like, that's the vast majority of the player base. And so they don't even know about the console-like version of the game in a lot of ways. So they're used to having skins and stuff.
You hand them a Wii, they're like, when am I supposed to do with this? No, Smash Brothers is on the Wii. Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, what's funny is for a long time when I went to locals, and I actually ran a few smaller scale locals, we were all running Melee on Homebrew Wii hacked Wiis. Like, because I was like, I'm not having some schmuck coming and stealing my GameCube discs. I'm not having that. You can just take the entire Wii before you take my disc. So, yeah, I also assume a lot of people have never even played Melee competitively on a GameCube. At least I can say my friends probably didn't.
Melee itself, the disc is rather expensive, and Wii's are only like $30-$40.
Yeah.
So like the Wii's are actually less expensive than discs, which is another weird oddity.
Yeah, and you also back in the day could walk into a Goodwill and just walk out with a box of Wii's. It was wild.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the Wii sold so much, and
none of the people wanted it beyond Wii Sports, so its shelf life was very limited.
Exactly right.
Yeah, it's still, to this day, you'll walk into people's houses, they have no consoles, but that old Wii, that Wii's hanging in there. It's my parents.
Wii's technically have slightly worse video quality than GameCubes, so you want a GameCube with its capture. That's irrelevant now because we have slippy mirroring in terms of like video capturing for streams. But there was an era where we still valued GameCubes, even though the Wii is basically a GameCube itself.
Oh, do you remember the GameCube component cables? You had to fight the Yakuza and pay $100-something to get a stupid component cable for the damn thing.
That is exactly what we had to do. That's, again, irrelevant now, but there was an era where that's what everyone had to do.
Wild. Well, I'm bringing all this up because I've had some things and theories about Melee and Smash that I thought would be interesting to talk about, but my opinion, my thoughts are, over the years as being someone who does YouTubing and I've interacted with a number of communities, Melee's an interesting one because on one hand, no community is more outwardly facing and outwardly accessible than Melee. Like, the scene, you know a lot of what's happening, but I would also say Melee is actually somewhat surprisingly insular at times. Whereas, like, let's say you're just a random YouTuber and you make a YouTube video about Melee. I've always got the impression that unless you know someone who knows someone who knows someone, like, no one's going to care what you have to say about the game. I've gone on to, like, Reddits and, forums and stuff, and I've given my thoughts on characters, and I was like, so are you a known player? No. Whatever. Get out of here. And so I'm excited because now this is an opportunity for me to voice some of my thoughts on Melee. So the first one, coming from my experience with arcade genres especially, kind of the story of Sakurai's relationship with Melee, because I have a different sort of view on it. And the view that you often hear when people talk about it is Sakurai made 64, he was just going ham on 64, and then he just went crazy on Melee. He's up, about killed him, he's up late at night, just going crazy. And then something happened between Melee and Brawl where he saw, like, what have I created? And he sees the Melee scene, and then he has some kind of crisis of game design, and then so from Melee onward, he's decided, okay, I'm going to make a bunch of really lame Smash games from this point forward. And for me, I've always thought this story is a little bit a misunderstanding, because we'll see this a lot across gaming, where people tend to view game developers and directors and creators as like Quentin Tarantino or something, where like they dictate everything that's done in the design. They're responsible for how the game feels and how the game plays because they're director. But actually, if you get more into how game design works and game development works, there are a lot of people who are much more responsible for things that basically don't get credited for it at all, or even among gamers who like them. This is why I'm so critical of stuff like remakes, and why I'm so critical of, okay, so Capcom made this game in 2000, so them remaking it in 2023, it's like the same thing. Games are a specific creation at a specific time by a specific team, and you can't quite just replicate that, and you can't just transfer some of that stuff into the future. So my view on it is I've always felt like there could be another person that Melee players should be looking into and researching a bit more.
Yashiki Suzuki. Yashiki Suzuki.
So what I did was I actually had a conversation with a shmup player about shmup development, and he was giving me some insights on how Battle Grega, a famous shmup, was programmed, and he was saying that actually a lot of what we consider really iconic about that game is not necessarily down to the director himself, but rather the guy who's doing the coding, the guy who's doing the programmer of the game, because the developer was telling me a lot of the things like the frame data, the hit stun, the way the things move, the way the things feel, those are actually decisions made by the programmer, not the director. So in the case of fighting games, for example, and my theory here is that in the case of Melee and Smash 64, if you look at the credits, they have a programmer, Yoshiki Suzuki. And what's very fascinating is he programmed Smash 64, he programmed Melee, and then ceased programming the rest of the series. And in my mind, I've always felt that when you look at the mechanics of Smash 64 and the mechanics of Melee, there is this feel that the two games share, that you can feel a continuity of the design between those two games, especially with stuff like hit stun and knockback and even movement. Even though Smash 64 doesn't have the advanced movement tech of Melee, the movement of the game still feels more like Melee than the later Smash games like Brawl. And a lot of those decisions, so movement, hit stun, knockback, Sakurai is not the one putting that in the game. It is actually most likely going to be the programmer or other staff that are hands-on writing the code. And what's happening is Sakurai's coming in and he's saying, all right, guys, I want you to put this in the game, but how it's done is actually implemented by the programmers. And so I think that could be an interesting explanation of the difference in feel between Brawl and Melee and Smash 64. Because if you think about it, why didn't Brawl feel like Smash 64? Because if it was just a matter of, okay, let's remove wave dashing, let's remove L canceling, you could still have a game that kind of feels like Smash 64, where it has this massive hit stun and massive knockback and has these crazy, chunky, crunchy feel to it. But that's not what Brawl feels like at all, or modern Smash feels like at all. The new Smash games, to me, which I don't like, have this really sort of like, find the right adjective for it.
What we often say is it's like you hit them like a balloon. So when you hit someone, they like pop to a certain place and then they stop. So like it's like it's like punching a balloon.
Yeah, it has a very safe, rounded edges. Like we're coming in, we're sanding down all the corners of the design. Whereas in Smash 64, for example, you hit someone, they just launch off a screen, and there's so much wild crap you can do to people in that game. And that game doesn't really have that much advanced movement tech or anything. And of course, Melee, famous for that. Melee, you stomp knee someone, they launch into their death. You get them off the stage, and they're just looking up at the stage, hopeless, because they know you're just waiting there with a down tilt. Like, come on, bitch. So yeah, there's just such a sharp contrast and difference in design. And so I started looking up this programmer a little bit, and there's only one interview with him that I could find, but he was talking about his development of Smash 64, actually. It was during the Smash 64 era, and he's talking about things like, well, Sakurai wanted slopes, so I had to figure out how slopes work. And he was referencing, okay, I looked at the slopes of Virtua Fighter 3. And then there are other things where he's talking about, okay, we got to figure out Mario's movement. He specifically said, I had to figure out Mario's movement. So from the limited information that I've been able to find, this guy is programming the physics. This guy's programming the movement. This dude is the one putting these into place. And then if you look at the credits in the later Smash games, they have a whole list of different programmers. And so I think that is part of the explanation of the difference between those two games and how I view that difference. So that when people say, how did Sakurai go from making bitchin' games to making, these lame Smash games, at least in my opinion, Well, I don't think it's just purely him deciding to be lame. I think it's also the change in staff. That staff that made Melee. This ties into more of my thoughts on Melee, actually, too, because the whole idea that Melee is just this beautiful accident. Somehow, Stompany works by accident, and all these different feels and mechanics work by purely accident. Like the programmers, as they're programming it, they're like, yeah, so you can in a state transition into shield out of an attack. That won't have any effect. Don't even think about that, guys. That won't have any effect on the game. Let's just continue going. I wanted to get your thoughts before I monologue on my thoughts on what do you think about Melee. Do you think Melee is a beautiful accident as the documentary describes it?
So I don't. I think there's a lot. Most content you find about Melee, it says it has that line. It's a beautiful accident. It's almost like God handed down Melee from the heavens, and it just came out that way. And I think almost all of Melee was on purpose, with of course a lot of unintended consequences. But like most competitive games, like if you look at StarCraft Brood War, they didn't know about like Mutalisk and how you can control them in a crazy way because of some byproducts of systems they created. But they did know a lot of things. They knew to make Marines have a certain fire rate and things like that, and they understood like how medics would interact with Marine stim, like those core things about the game. They understood that. And in Melee, it's really undeniable that they knew almost everything because, first of all, you can look at the developer mode of the game, and it's incredibly detailed. It has action states for everything. It has like all these counters and ways that they clearly tested, which you can do yourself to in their playtesting.
You have to program this stuff in. I don't think people quite realize that. You don't just magically state transitions don't just magically appear in code. Someone has to go in and put the state transition into the code.
Right. There's no way to like accidentally fall into like some of these things working. Now, is it possible that wave dashing in particular, they saw it and they were like, well, I guess we'll keep that in. It looks cool. I think that's possible. Like there's certain examples, but we know for a fact there's documented evidence that they said they knew about wave dashing and they kept it in. So there's things like that. Another good defense of that point is that they have patches to the game. There's 1.0, there's 1.01, 1.02, and there's the PAL version of the game, all balance patches to Melee. And they're very targeted and they're very smart balance changes to Melee.
Yeah, it's just it's coincidence that Falco's Dare gets nerfed in PAL. Like that was purely coincidental that Falco's Dare, one of the best moves in the game, gets nerfed.
They knew more about like how we view Melee back then in like 2001, 2002 than we did, because if you look at early community tier lists, they were horrific, right? But the developers at the time understood that no, Sheik's really good, Fox is really good, Falco's really good, Mart's really good. Those are the characters they nerfed, right? They actually nerfed the top tiers. Mart's down air is nerfed, his aerial drift is nerfed. So like they knew actually who was good and who was bad. They missed on some cases. They also nerfed Ganondorf. I don't think Ganon deserved that. Poor Ganon. But
you know what it is? It was that one dude in the office who's just stomping and then wizard punching Sakurai. He's like, nerf this immediately.
Immediately, we got to get this out of here, right?
There was that one Ganon player in the office.
They buffed low tiers, like Kirby got buffed a ton. Like they clearly knew who was good and who was bad. And you might have noticed that like these are like very selective buffing and nerfing is like something fighting game developers do if they care about competitive balance. If they were just making Melee to like be this party game, they just wouldn't care. They would release PAL and be like, who cares? But they clearly cared. And someone in that office cared.
I'll tell you, my theory is that someone is named is Suzuki. And this is now internet. You can prove me wrong, but in that process, if you prove me wrong, please research this more because I need your help because I can't speak Japanese. But from what the interviews of him I can find, this dude seems plugged in because he's talking about Virtua Fighter 3, an incredible fighting game. And I'm pretty sure in that interview, he also talks about he wanted to make something legit. He didn't want to make some lame game. And then he didn't work on the series ever again. Don't you think that's odd? I just think it's odd that he's like sent to the Kirby dungeons. Like, buddy, okay. I think my pet theory on this is Suzuki went a little ham in the coding, and Sakurai didn't quite know how much this dude was doing, and he was a big Virtua Fighter fan and a fan of all these other fighting games because he wanted to make a legit competitive game, and then it is discovered to be a legit competitive game, and then Sakurai's like, buddy, No. I think that's
So,
my theory on what happened.
One thing there is, so first of all, I have never met Suzuki himself. I would love to. I've met a handful of the members who've actually made Melee, including Sakurai himself. So I've had a pretty extended conversation with Sakurai. I had to use a translator. So here's what I'd say. Sakurai does deserve a lot of credit. We can't just wave off everything he did. First of all, he definitely came up with...
My point is not all
Not
the
all the
credit.
credit.
He gets
Of course
all
not.
the credit right now. And I'm saying,
Sure.
all?
Definitely not all. Definitely not all. He definitely gets credit for the core concept of a sumo platform fighter. Like, basically, you knock someone off. That is 100% him. He, in fact, came up with that idea way before Smash 64. And if you look at the original Game Boy game, Kirby's Dream Land, that's where that started. You might notice in Kirby games, Kirby gets hit too and goes flying off the screen. It starts
Kirby's
with
top tier in
Kirby.
Smash 64.
Right, because he's a favorite of Sakurai's. Also, Sakurai has a heavy hand in character movesets, what characters included, like basically things that are like really core to the game design and balance of what would
Rebuttal.
happen.
I don't want to interrupt you, but a quick rebuttal, which is, look at Falcon in the newer Smash games. He still stomps. I don't know if he still stomps knees. I barely play 5. The change between Melee and the later Smash games isn't so much their concepts or move lists. It's not really the directorial vision of the series. I would say someone who doesn't play them competitively, they might not notice that much of a shift between Melee and Smash and all that if they just playing them in their living room, not worrying about it. But like those details, the detail of how much goddamn delicious hit stun is in Stomp, where they're just launched at this perfect angle that just seems to line up with knee. How strange. Things like that, or like, you know, the knockback on the forward smashes and all, like those details.
Was he tweaking the numbers? Was he tweaking the numbers on every move? I do know that he spends a lot of time playtesting. Like, that's one of his the things he does in all the new Smash games. He does do that a lot to this day. It's hard to take credit away from him, but I do think it is. I mean, this is what everyone in the Smash community always thinks. It's like playing two different series.
It is.
There's Melee
it's not
and
like
the games after
it is. As
Melee.
someone who has no loyalty or affiliation to the later Smash games, I look at those and I'm like, lame. I hate them. And I like Melee. Like, that's... And Smash 64. Look, those are the two ones that I like, and I hate them.
There's a reason there's a divide in the community. Like, no other game series is like this. In general,
Yeah, I can't think of... The closest I can think of is maybe Third Strike and the rest of Street Fighter, where those Third Strike guys are like, we're just playing Third Strike.
Right.
But that's still not as extreme as Smash.
What I mean is more like, even like, okay, there's people still play. Brood War at this point is more competitively popular than StarCraft 2 is. You could argue, right? Especially in Korea. But I don't think people would argue like there is the level of design and directional shift as what happens in Smash, which is just like a crazy shift. It's again like a completely different series. 180, and I think there is like this narrative also that Sakurai saw how Melee was being played, and he had distaste for it. He actually saw basically the reception for it and wasn't happy. And I think there's, some quotes from him which back that up, where he was like, basically, we made it too hard. By the way, there's a degree where he's right about that. Like, Melee is legitimately too hard. I know so many people.
So if you're sitting in a boardroom at Nintendo, Melee's a problem. This is cutting across the Nintendo ethos of game design. Melee is the one based game that snuck by them. They're like, no. Yeah, absolutely. If you're in the Nintendo boardroom, Melee is a problem because this game does not fit what they're trying to go for at all. And I would say, it cuts against it, in fact.
There are maniacs like me who love it for being so hard, right? And who will dedicate their entire lives to trying to master these techniques. But for a lot of people, when they played Melee, they were like, hey, I can't control my character, right? I legitimately am. It's going too fast. Like, they try to play Fox, and all of a sudden they are like, oh my, I'm dashing across the screen too fast. I don't know how to aim my moves. All these sort of things that you clearly see in the casual level. I mean, even to this day, we run into this problem. When someone new comes in, they're like, dude, it's like unlike any other game I've ever played. It's asking me to move my hands faster than I'm like used to. I've never had to do that before. There's no buffer.
For the Melee fans out there, I just want to give this message to Melee fans in case you're tuning in. Once you go outside the Melee bubble, there are actual fighting games like that. It's just not a lot of people play them necessarily. Like Virtua Fighter, your hands are... The APM in that game is crazy too. even Tekken to a degree too, if you get into the advanced wave dashing and back dashing and all that sort of stuff, if you're a Mishima player and everything. These games, or old school KOF, like if you look at Melee, the connection with KOF I feel like is really undeniable with a lot of its combat systems and stuff. So there are other options out there, but if you're looking in the world of Nintendo, if you're looking through the eyes of a Nintendo fan, absolutely nothing.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you're right. Other fighting games are other technical fighting games. Not as many on the modern end. And to some degree, again, I think you can argue that accessibility, because it's so vital to a fighting game's long-term competitive success. You can argue that being that inaccessible in terms of being that hard can be tough. I'm telling you, as someone who's been playing the game for 20 years, there are techniques I can't do, like consistently. And there are tons of things which I still struggle to do consistently after practicing for 20 years. That's just the nature of the game. And that is something he saw, and I don't completely blame him for it. And so he took the series in a different direction. Now with Brawl, it felt like in a lot of ways he made that game out of hate. Because tripping, there's no good reason to do that. There's no good, like, even if you want to make it slightly slower.
I like to have a little fan fiction in my head that he's like, Yu Suzuki's in the office and they're planning out Brawl. He's like, we're gonna have tripping, and Yu Suzuki's like, I can't do it. I'm sorry.
I can't do this.
And then I have to replace you with 3 other people then, because it's going in.
Yeah, and he's tamed that down. I mean, you see with Ultimate, sure, a lot of the core concept designs of Brawl into Smash 4 to Ultimate are kept, but it's slightly more competitive. There are definitely more things that a competitive player would find interesting in the later iterations. Whereas Brawl, it's like very clear that they're trying to go as hard 180 away from Melee as like a game can be, right? Like it's while staying in the same genre. Like it's as opposite as it could be, and that's why the Rift got created.
I remember when I was somewhat aware of how Melee is played competitively all the way back in 2000, whenever Brawl came out, 2008 or whatever, because I watched these old combo videos I got from a file sharing site. These combo videos, I think they're the DBR videos, like those types. Yeah. And actually, the Mike Nasty one, that one was my favorite. So I was quite certain for a long time Samus was top tier, the best character in the game. And so I remember getting Brawl. I learned to wave dash via GameFAQs, by the way. I went onto GameFAQs and got someone's random post on how to wave dash, and I showed my friends and stuff. They thought it was pretty cool. So anyway, so Brawl comes out. I'm the one dude on the block who knows how to wave dash, and I pick Samus. Samus can't wave dash anymore, and I said, guys, this game ain't legit. This game ain't good. And then we played it for a bit more, and I was like, yeah, this game sucks. So I was not a competitive player at that point. I just had, that gamer instinct of wanting things interesting and competitive and tough, right? Or something to dig into. And Brawl did not have that for me at all.
But Brawl sold excellently. It was on Wii. There was Subspace Emissary. So, end of the day, the systems, yeah.
So you can say Brawl sold super well, but can't you also argue that part of the reason for those sales is because of the legacy that Melee set up? Because I bought Brawl day one because of Melee. Because if you track it, Melee into Brawl, big spikes. Brawl into Smash 4, how did those sales go? So you could also see, maybe Brawl set up kind of an expectation going into Smash 4 too. I
also think most people were if you just look at even contemporary, what people on the casual level thought of Melee, it was very positive on the casual level. I think people still really liked it.
Casual gamers like hit stun and they like knockback. Those are fundamental things that even casual gamers really appreciate.
But there's still some attention being made to the competitive players. You see it every time with the directs that they do, the Smash directs that they do when they announce a new character. He still talks to the competitive base for Ultimate. Very clearly, there's still thought being done, at least with Ultimate.
Yeah, but I get the feeling. So this is my feeling on competitive Ultimate. Maybe I'm a bit harsh, but this is Electric Underground. My friend quit Melee, and the only way we'd hang out is if he played Smash Ultimate or whatever. So I had to play it for a bit there. Then I said, God, I can't do this anymore. And then we ended up playing Rivals. I could convince them to at least play that. But so I had to play Smash Ultimate for a bit there. And my feeling on the competitive nature of Smash Ultimate is when you go into the playground and you're allowed to go play tag and touch football, but the duty and the PE teacher are right there, don't tackle, no tackling, kids. That to me, that's Smash Ultimate. Smash Ultimate's yeah, we give you kind of the illusion that this is somewhat competitive, but there is a lot of safety nets and guardrails so that when you show up to your first tournament, you're not getting a down air spiked 4 times in a row and all this kind of stuff. Like, I feel like Ultimate is intentionally made with like the balloon stuff we were talking about, intentionally made not to be too competitive. Let's not get too crazy with it.
There are a lot of reasons why I like Melee more than Ultimate, just because I'm obviously a Melee player. I think a lot of the bigger criticisms I think people do is that with as many characters as there are many of those characters which people find unfun. Let's say the Pac-Mans and the Olimars and the Minecraft Steves of the world. I think that can be a part of it, is that they're not exactly competitively focused designs.
Also, horrible way to make a competitive game, by the way. Let's just keep adding random characters over and over and over. Not really well balanced. Not a great idea.
80 plus characters, right? So, now some people really like that. Like, I mean, the thing is that, like, there is this extremely different ethos between the two communities, right? There is the Melee players who are into it because of the physics. They're into it because of the history, the physics, the legacy. They're really into the storylines, the scenes, the people of the scenes. They love that, right? And then there's the Ultimate people who, like, when Cloud gets announced to be in the game, that's like life. They're crying, right? They like the fan service aspects. I think that's like completely fine, and that's one way to enjoy video games, right? Like it's completely okay. But it's definitely
I'll give you an example of my thoughts on it. They added Kazuya, or one of the Tekken characters, to Smash Ultimate, and you know, I'm a Tekken guy too. And so my friend, again, he was trying to get me to play Ultimate with him. He's like, dude, they've got Tekken character in there for you. I was like, all right, fine. I played Kazuya or whatever the Tekken character in there was, and I was like, this is an insult to Tekken. So I'm one of those types. I'm not one of those types who starts, you know, doing backflips. I'm always like, okay, but are you doing it right? Am I feeling like this is Kazuya? And I didn't feel that way, but I definitely know what you're saying, though.
He's pretty good at that game.
No, but I mean, like, compared to, like, I wanted that movement, that feel, that, like, not by ult standards, you know, I wanted it to feel good, and didn't feel good to me.
Yeah, I feel you. So, I mean, I will say, like, you know, it feels like at least there's at least still some thought about the competitive scene. It's not like they completely diverged like they did with Brawl. With Brawl, it felt like it was a middle finger, right? I think it's changed. I think Sakurai's thinking about it. He knows about it a lot. He thinks about it a lot.
Do you wonder, you know, we're being real here. Do you wonder part of that is because Nintendo figured out how to monetize it a little bit more than back in the day? Because I think back in the day, Nintendo looked at the Smash scene and they're like the way they looked at Blockbuster, and they're like, these guys are just milking our franchise and making money off our backs and not paying us nothing. Whereas, you know, now they found a little bit more ways to utilize the competitive scene for their own ends. That's how I felt. Maybe that could partly be the reason for the shift, because I just don't feel that Ultimate, like, if they care so much about the competitive play of Ultimate, why don't they have good netcode? Like, why is the netcode so abysmal? And my poor Ultimate playing friend, when COVID hit, trying to play Ultimate online, I'm like, oh, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, we're at a point where it's becoming the only major, like, fighting game series where you can say that it doesn't have, like, really solid netcode. That Street Fighter just released, that netcode is gorgeous. Like, I've been playing so much Street Fighter. It's really good. It's actually genuinely good. Strive's netcode, famous. Obviously, Killer Instinct a long time ago, a decade ago, was good. Melee's netcode's amazing through modding. So, like,
it was not too bad on Antlers if you were close to people back in the day.
Yeah, but now with Slippy, it's just genuinely really good. And so you go through series by series in terms of major fighting game franchises, and they have pretty good netcode. And so the big sore thumb is Ultimate and how it's like it sticks out. And unfortunately, like, if you ask me to bet,
does Ultimate have frame data? I'm assuming not, but I don't know
like
Ultimate that well.
In its training mode, of course, no, I'm not even close. It doesn't have like, you compare Street Fighter's training mode and like its recording features and all that. Like, Melee has that with Uncle Punch.
Play Virtua Fighter on the PlayStation 2. That stuff's got frame data in there. I mean, it's not like these are new concepts to competitive fighting games.
Sure.
Yeah, I that's what I've always felt about Nintendo, isn't it? See, Nintendo is always able to do this kind of option select because their fan base is so dedicated to them that they can always kind of be like, yeah, we're competitive, but we're not going to treat it that seriously. And their fans will kind of be like, all right, no, but it's still legit, even though you don't have frame data and you have awful netcode.
Right. Part of it is like you know, like the bar on that is not the same as it is for other developers. Like, it felt like after Street Fighter V, Capcom knew that they had to come out with Street Fighter 6 with like a full package. And say what you will about the modes, it's a full package. Like, it has so much stuff in it. They even put other games in it. You have to feel like
hear me
arcade
rant
games for
about
no reason.
Street Fighter 6. I got an hour and 40-minute damn near documentary style video on it.
Right.
Yeah, but
Right.
you know what's interesting? I'm really glad you brought up Street Fighter 6 because, see, I am of the more critical bent and the critical nature. I think there's a lot to that these days that is missing in online conversation. Like, because you're so incentivized to be unconditional positive regard because that's how you make connections, that's how you move forward. And so when you are more negative about things, often what people will say is like, well, you're just bringing things down, you know, that this is just you not, you know, this isn't being productive. But Street Fighter 6 is the perfect example of that because I feel very strongly one reason why Street Fighter 6 made this changes that it did is because 5 got dunked on so hard that Capcom had to sit down and be like, okay, we kind of screwed up, guys, right? Like, we kind of messed this up. But if Capcom, if everyone had just been like, you know, Street Fighter 5 is fine, you know, it's fine, we accept this, do you think they would have gone as hard on 6? I don't think they would have, especially the netcode.
I don't think so.
You remember what a disaster 5's netcode situation was?
No.
People actually modded the netcode of 5, and then Capcom had to be like, all right, but you can't mod our netcode.
I mean, the fighting community universally had to do basically a war for rollback to convince these Japanese developers to do it.
Oh,
and at this point, they know that they cannot release a game without it. And it's great because I feel like every game's going to come out with it except for Smash Brothers. Right, and so like you know, I do think the bar has been raised in Street Fighter 6 to like an incredible degree. Even though both of us don't think World Tour is like very good, I still think
really bad.
The fact that there is like a comprehensive one-player mode
they got
is going to tell every other
like they got away with
like,
World Tour mode because it's like the thought that counts basically. Even if you ask people who defend it, they're like, all right, okay, fine, Mark, yeah, it's a hot mess, but it's the thought that counts. It's like the guy who never handed in his homework for 10 years and then one day he hands in his essay. The teacher's gonna be like, all right, okay, I'll give you a fairly good grade just because you handed it in. That's World Tour mode.
It's because realistically, fighting game one-player modes have been bad for so long. This is like, it's such a low bar to clear, and they cleared it by like a mile. So it's like, hey, if you're giving every other game a 9.0 for having no one-player effectively, you better give this one for having at least something in there. You know, you got to give it a good score still. And I think that now though, I think every new one that comes out is gonna start thinking like, hey, if they're putting like a full Yakuza game in their fighting game, I guess we have to do that too? Like, question mark? And that's like how things will
didn't
evolve.
get credit for this though was Tekken. Tekken had actually a lot of sick single-player modes up till 7. 7, I think they're kind of like, oh, we don't need these. But like Tekken Force on Tekken 4 is sick.
A full beat 'em up.
It's sick. So people, you know, are commenting like, oh, name one better mode than World Tour? I'm like, have you played Tekken Force, brother? Or the Virtua Fighter Quest mode? These modes did exist, but again, poor 3D fighters just get ignored. Mostly it's like whatever those weirdos are doing. Sorry to interrupt what you were saying about the single player modes and the expectations and how they are different for Smash Bros than the other fighting game series. But I've always felt there is this Nintendo exceptionalism that exists in video games where, you know, they get a little bit of an extra grace that other developers simply do not get.
Well, I mean, I think you see it in business practices too. I think everyone like just lambasts EA or Activision for almost anything they do in terms of monetization or sequelitis. But like, Nintendo's putting out like Mario parties and Mario sports games and like on a yearly basis, like as churn, they're churning through them, and sometimes
sell you the same ROM 15 times and then DMC, you know, take down any site that even thinks about having these ROMs, you know, or if you mod your Switch. Even if you don't mod it for pirating, if they catch you with a modded Switch, they will obliterate it. They will lock it out of everything forever. They're trying to like destroy those modded Switches. And I feel like if Sony or Xbox pulled that, Kotaku, you know, whatever, death. But Nintendo, everyone's like, yeah, but you know, you shouldn't be messing with Nintendo. You know, you don't be doing that.
I mean, the craziest, most anti-consumer practice that maybe in the whole industry, and this is an industry with a lot of anti-consumer practices, is the fact that every new Nintendo console has its own shop.
Every
And they don't
time.
transfer.
Yeah, and you have to buy it
Like-
every single time. I bought Super Metroid how many times now?
That's unreal. That's crazy. But again, like they get away with it, and it's a lot of it's because, frankly, I think a lot of people, and probably correctly, view them as being the guys who all but invented video games. Yes, there was Atari before them, but they saved the industry in the 80s, and they've made so many good games.
That's the big hole in this story for me is if you're an arcade player, you're like, video games were fine. But if you're a home console player, you're like, oh my God, no home consoles. Go to the arcade, homie. Like, arcades were killing it. But, yeah,
Another
arcades always get left
like,
out of this poor conversation. It's always about the home consoles and Nintendos and Ataris. Never mind the bastion of arcade game design.
And arcades were bigger, by the way. Arcades were legitimately bigger than console in the era that we're talking about.
I can't even think of a modern equivalent of this anymore because there really isn't. I would say movie, like it used to be once upon a time that like a movie opened and the box office mattered more than the DVD sales and everything, but that's all changing. But I guess think of it back in the past. Arcade was box office. That's where you made your money. And then home console was like, you get those are your DVDs. You get a little bit of money on the side there. But a lot of developers, Capcom, we're talking Namco, lived and died by their arcade division, not their home console division.
And those arcade developers, who were effectively carrying the industry in the 80s and have set the groundwork for video games that we know them today, when Nintendo made its largest name in the industry, which is with the NES, they were giving it a hard time. I mean, look at Konami. They had to make a whole new company, a whole new label.
A lot of these NES games, like, the hardware could not even touch arcade at that point. It just couldn't.
Sure.
The most funny and famous example of this, which it kind of worked out, but the funniest example of this was Ninja Gaiden, because the NES could not handle... Ninja Gaiden is actually originally a beat 'em up, and the NES could not handle multiple sprites on screen. The poor NES is like, I can't handle more than so many sprites on screen. This is too much. So they had to literally change the entire game into a new game, a platformer. And funnily enough, that platformer ended up becoming more famous and iconic than the original arcade version. But yeah, so there's an example of what they'd have to do. They'd have to... Home console ports were like brand new games. They were like demakes. The demake trend? It's like a demake of the game, basically.
I mean, there is a loftiness that Nintendo's held to, and rightly so, frankly. Like, they are... If you made a list of, like, who's the most influential company in terms of video game history...
I'd say Capcom.
Nintendo's number one. You think Capcom? Okay.
In terms of
Nintendo,
I'll make my case to
top
the
three for sure.
I'll make my case to the Nintendo fans out there. Think about this. So yes, if you just lock in on home consoles, sure, Nintendo can be the home console king. Think about some of the most influential, important genres of all time: fighting games, Melee's a fighting game, beat 'em ups, character action, survival horror. All four of those, guess who invented those? Capcom, baby. Like, all of my favorite shit, and I'm not even a big Capcom fanboy. Like, they're not my favorite developer, but just historically, Capcom in their prime, historically, is insane, and in my opinion, destroys Nintendo, because my view of Nintendo has always been, Nintendo is like the company that sees something that's working, and then they kind of adapt it into their own little, home console market. But they're not coming up with this stuff. They're always taking these concepts and making them palatable to the general audience. But when was the last time Nintendo made a game you're like, this is cutting edge, this is new, this is something I've never seen before? Almost never. What they're always doing is they're always taking what's already being done, that's already working, and then they run it through their little Nintendo filter, like Disney, and pop it out on your home console. But no one pays attention to the stuff going on outside that little world, so to them, they're like, Nintendo's sick. Nintendo's coming up with Breath of the Wild. This is like an open world game where you go around and explore and stuff. I've never seen this before.
It's just the number of games they've made that are good is a lot, right? And there's that.
I'd say though, Nintendo is very front heavy. Like their era during the SNES and NES days, and I'd even give them N64 and GameCube. They were doing some bangers there. But like Wii onward, I would say their library is actually quite weak comparatively.
Sure. I mean, I tend to agree with that as well. But I think that what will be most interesting about Nintendo is what will happen when the old guard retires. Like, what actually happens when Aonuma, Miyamoto, like, basically, They have some of the goats of the game.
Iwata.
They have some of the best people in terms of like, but they're old, right? And when those guys retire,
They outsource a lot of their stuff now.
right, to Bandai a lot too.
The new,
Yep.
like what do they actually develop in-house outside of Zelda?
I mean, they have some stuff, but like you're right about like it's a ton of the titles that you think of as Nintendo games now are like second or third party. Platinum, right? Monolith with the Xenoblade, like a lot of the stuff that like is coming out.
Okay,
Sure.
this is perfect. Oh, I'm really glad that we're talking about Nintendo because this brings me to a topic that I really wanted to talk to you about because you are on the other side. So I see it from the outside, you see it from the inside. So I thought this could be a very interesting conversation, which is the famous Melee versus Nintendo. This is such a complicated subject, but in my opinion, over the past few years especially, I think as time has gone on, I think the way this relationship has developed has gotten far more complicated than initially. So back in like the Evo donation drive day, you know, it really was kind of that classic story of like there's just this humble group of scrappy young guys coming together trying to do something cool, and Nintendo's just coming down, slapping on Melee's good time. And, you know, Nintendo, I am no Nintendo defender, as you've all already can tell. I'm not going to sit here and say Nintendo are this, you know, happy-go-lucky company. They are, outside their family-friendly presentation, in terms of business practices, they are among the most ruthless and brutal. And they will, if you cross them, prepare yourself. Look at Team Executor. You cross them, you are in for some trouble. They're the company you don't want to cross. So I'm not saying that I side with Nintendo on what they do when it comes to their relationship with Melee, but I felt like during the era with the donation drive and everything, like that approach seemed, I think, a more reasonable and healthy. But as we've gone on, I feel like the relationship between the two, Nintendo and Melee, has gotten a little more muddy at times, where because Melee, I think, in principle has the better point in principle, I think a lot of the practices have kind of devolved into not the best ideas. So I thought it'd be interesting to share my thoughts and get your feedback because you're someone who knows the other side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right that there was an era where it felt like at least there was some sort of cohabitation in the space between Nintendo and the Smash community. And I say Smash community because honestly, the Ultimate guys are just kind of in the same boat. It's just Melee's always like kind of has the old heads, the kind of the leaders of the scene, so forth. So they often control the conversation. But like it's gotten far more toxic and it's gotten far more contentious. There maybe in like 2013, 14, if you really look at the history, people were, for the most part, trying to work with Nintendo and hoping for a greater esports future, trying to have some sort of collaboration. Whereas now, they will do everything and fight tooth and nail to not work with Nintendo. It's actually like a core fundamental belief of what feels like the majority of the community, that the most they want from Nintendo is to be left alone and to have nothing to do with them, right? That seems to be where the tides have shifted, which is a hard position to be in when they own the IP, right? In terms of the way IP law is, at least as stated in the Western world.
Yes, and the points that I'm talking about here is like, when it comes to Nintendo, that's not a tree you want to bark up. That's not a battle you want to have, because I feel like, in my opinion, I think the Melee community is sort of overestimating their position in this situation. For example, remember with I think it was the Big House, you know, the Slippy Big House, Nintendo cease and desisted and said, you know, all right, enough of this. My thought is, rather than going on making this massive statement and like getting in all these articles and trying to like turn the press against Nintendo, I feel like the more wise strategy for the Smash community, just from the outside, is to more like get underneath the radar of Nintendo. Because I think if the Smash community looks at it from Nintendo's point of view, not that it's sympathetic, but like if you understand your enemy, like Art of War, if you understand your enemy, you can make smarter decisions. And I would assume, this is my own projection, but I would assume Nintendo's view of Smash is quite different than how Smash probably thinks Nintendo views them. Because whenever I listen to conversations among Smash players and community members about what to do, I think Smash is overestimating their position in that Nintendo thinks that the Smash is is like helping get the name out there and helping to represent the game and helping to generate sales for Nintendo through their existence. I don't think Nintendo views it that way at all. I think Nintendo views Smash as a massive liability that is cutting against their core interests, and if they will find a way, they will obliterate the Smash scene and replace it with an in-house community that they foster and that they're ahead of. Because just you think about it from their position, what is the goal of Smash and the goal of Nintendo? Are they truly that interested in competitive play and esports? No. In my opinion, no. None of their decision making makes any sense along those lines. If you compare them to any other developer who does care about competitive play, look at Street Fighter, look at Tekken, look at all these other competitive games, like Nintendo is always doing things that cut across the competitive community. I think intentionally so. And then if you look at just the power of the Nintendo IP, the might that is Nintendo, they are the most powerful IPs in existence. I think they view the relationship as reversed. Actually, I think Nintendo reviews the relationship as the Smash community is taking their IP and you guys are pimping it out for your own benefits. Because actually in Japan, it is illegal to run tournaments that we do in the US, like where you can just have people come and they pay and you make money and all that kind of thing. Like in Japan, that is illegal. And it only became kind of somewhat illegal, I think in 2018 when they started allowing licenses, but you have to be licensed to do this. So I feel like they look at the Smash community, especially in the United States, as like Blockbuster. Like, you guys are pimping out our IP. You're using our IP for your benefit to build up your own companies beyond the summit or whatever else. You are using our work to enrich yourself, and you are paying us nothing. In their mind, it's funny because when you hear Smash players talk about this, they're like, why aren't Nintendo sponsoring events? Why aren't Nintendo giving us prize money? I feel like Nintendo's like, you guys should be paying us. That's kind of the vibe that I get from Nintendo. So I wanted to get your thoughts. Do you think the Smash community views it this way? Am I misunderstanding kind of the message of the Smash community? Because from the outside, it looks like the Smash community just thinks if they make a big stink and they make a bunch of Twitter and Kotaku articles, Nintendo will back down. And I feel like Nintendo's a Japanese company. The amount of copyright law in Japan is crazy. You think the United States is crazy? Japan is next level. I'm pretty sure they outlawed modding consoles in Japan. Like, they are next level when it comes to copyright. Eureka shut down the entire Tetris Grandmaster 3 community because of copyright law. They're like, no, we do not allow you copyright. And people complain about it, but they're Japanese. They don't care. They don't care about social media. They don't care about Twitter. They're sitting in a headquarters in Japan like these whiny Westerners. Who cares? So that's always how I've wondered if maybe the Smash community kind of sees Nintendo's motivations and understands that Nintendo is not going to be your friend and you're going to have to play by their rules. At least that's been my perception.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying is making sense, but I think there's a fuller vision to it. A fuller vision to it, basically. So what you're saying about how Nintendo views the operators in the scene as pimping out their IP, I think that part is absolutely spot on, and I agree with that. I think in general, they feel like, hey, why are all these people making tournaments, money, content? Yeah, why are they doing all these things off of our IP? And they feel that way, by the way, about YouTube creators. They're like, these guys are making YouTube videos using our IP?
You literally used to have to partner with Nintendo to make monetizable YouTube videos about Nintendo. These guys are next level.
And even though they've rolled that back, they're still hard about that. They still strike stuff randomly, and if you're a YouTube creator, you know. And it's a constant struggle. No
Mario RPG music, bitch.
Right, they're the hardest company in the entire industry about this, by the way. There's no company that's even close to them. No company views it the way they do. So that part you're right about. So here's the thing where I would disagree with you about, is the idea that they don't view the competitive scene as an asset. And the reason I say that is because they have invested into it and they have done a lot of steps which indicate that they are invested into it, but they just haven't done it well. so for example,
but
if you remember
I'd like to talk about this because you know the details. So some of these details I want to try to get from you. Who is the liaison? I'm assuming it's Nintendo of America, like with what's once was Reggie and that side of things, not Nintendo of Japan. Like the link between Smash and the community outreach from Nintendo, I'm assuming it's Nintendo of America. Is that right?
That's right. So a big misconception people have is they assume that Nintendo of Japan's pulling all the strings and is basically the overlord, and we have to deal with all these Japanese practices. And there's some degree which is true because there's conversations with the developers, especially Sakurai's word is still law with a lot of this stuff because he is considered basically the godfather of the game. Nintendo's really interesting, and actually this is one of the best things about them. One of the things I like is that they give their artists a lot of control within their company in terms of like the franchises. So like Aonuma, what Aonuma says about Zelda is what Zelda's gonna be, right? And similarly, what Sakurai says about Smash Brothers is what Smash Brothers is gonna be. If he says he doesn't want competitive Smash anymore, it'll be gone the next day. That's just generally how they work, and I actually like that part about them because that means the artists have some level of control of their company.
But the part about that is, no, that's good, but it's also scary for Smash because I know a little bit about Japanese companies on the shmup side of things, So you compare Nintendo to like shmup developers, how little of an insect shmup developers are monetarily compared to Nintendo. Right. Yet, like you can't stream certain games from arcades even because the company doesn't want, there's that strict with the copyright and that kind of thing. You can't share replays of certain things in certain areas because they're that strict with the copyright. So, but the thing about like Japanese developers is like you're saying, there's sort of a principle to it that's different than Western people. Like, but is that good or bad? Because like on your side of things, I feel like if Nintendo were a Western developer, like NRS or something, money could talk. Business could make this happen. But I feel like with Japanese developers, they have their principles. And if you're crossing the principles, they will crush you. And they're actually quite hard to get them to see things your way. So it might be good in a lot of cases, but I don't know if it's good for Smash. If you're crossing Nintendo and the Japanese side, it could be trouble.
So basically most of the conflict that's happened, actually all of the conflict that's happened, has been between Nintendo of America and the Smash community. So every single thing you've ever read about, and a lot of the stuff you haven't read about, has all been communication between Nintendo of America and the Smash community. There's some degree of Japan influence in terms of Nintendo of America's decision making, especially copyright, but for the most part, it's American lawyers and American personnel who are doing a lot of this, and a lot of it they're doing independently from Japan. So for the most part, it's a war between Nintendo of America and the Smash community, and specifically in the last half decade or so, a group within Nintendo of America, which are full-time employees, called Nintendo Versus. So when I say there's investment within Nintendo for the competitive sphere, I mean from when the Switch was launched. If you remember the Switch's announcement trailer, this is a very important point. Splatoon Esports was on literally introducing the Switch into the world. They had a shot of Splatoon in a stadium to show to people.
I have a quick retort that might be interesting to think about. But don't you think on Nintendo side of things, Splatoon is a less valuable IP, and so they can be more experimental with it, versus Smash, which they consider a very valuable IP? That would be my retort. Is they're more willing to take some risks with Splatoon that they might not take with Smash?
Maybe, and they have done Splatoon tournaments with ESL and with others, which are licensed tournaments. But basically, there's the Nintendo Versus group, and there's sort of equivalent liaisons in Europe and Japan that kind of deal in those regions. But Nintendo America is the hub of all competitive Nintendo games, right? Through this Nintendo Versus unit, right? And that's the primary communication that's been happening, and they're the ones who kind of shut everything down routinely, right?
But
and
do you wonder if they are the foot soldiers for Nintendo of Japan? They're sitting in board meetings, and Nintendo of Japan are giving them their marching orders, and they say, make this happen. And then the Nintendo of America is like, okay, let's try to make this happen. And it's obviously not going well. But do you think it's not purely independent, that maybe they can be the foot soldiers for Nintendo of Japan for certain things?
So, yes, to a degree. But in general, Japan is not that involved in the competitive scene. Like, they're not, like, making the strategies. They might have to approve some of these things. But a lot of, like, the actions, like we're talking about, who is the person who is deciding this tournament gets shut down? It's some dude in America who is going on some vague thing they were told about policy about copyright.
Yes, that's what I'm assuming though, is because Nintendo of Japan. We'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the rule sets, but let me tell you, Japan takes copyright crazy serious, dead serious, way more than even the United States does. And so I could see in Nintendo of America, like they have this sort of like spreadsheet, and they see Slippy come across, they come across that in your tournament announcement, or they hear about the tournament, and they know, well, panic button, I'm getting my ass fired if I don't shut this down immediately. And almost in a way, like, because they're a middleman, I almost feel like middlemen can actually be more aggressive than people at top because they're scared. They're scared they'll lose their job. So they'll be extra cautious and extra sort of like confrontational, even, perhaps. That's my theory.
Yes, but the thing is that those middlemen have not done a good job, right? So the thing is like, what I mean to say is, if we're saying, okay, well, the American guys are just the middlemen in between, the truth of the matter is, if I had to estimate the amount of damage done by Japan's policy and the American people's execution, it's mostly the American people's execution that's been the problem, right? If the Japan people just said, hey, watch out for these copyright like flags and abide by these general policies, that's fine. But the American people have done a poor job of communicating to the community to know what our boundaries are, like, so we don't like. Could
I bring up a specific question? Again, because you're in the inside. These are specific questions I want to ask. So the big house during COVID with Slippy, like, now I'm not talking about average smasher on Reddit. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the people, in charge of big house, the people on the community side, not Nintendo side, but on the Smash community side, the people who run big house, people who run these big events. I would wonder if these guys would be, if they were more aware of what Japan and Nintendo are specifically concerned about, if even at that stage, before we get into the Twitter battles and the shutdowns and the protests, at the stage before that, if there was an understanding, listen, we cannot run Slippy in a major. This will not work out. This will be big trouble because Nintendo, if you make a ROM hack of something, Nintendo is going to hunt you down, AMR2 or whatever. They will hunt you down if you ROM hack something or make a game that's even slightly copyright infringement. So that's what I'm saying about being a little more critical of the Smash community, because I feel like I kind of almost get the impression that what the Smash community's sort of MO is, they're like, okay, yeah, Nintendo probably won't like this, but in principle, we feel like it's right to do this, so let's do it. And then when shit hits the fan, then, the whole Twitterverse can get aflame.
So the hard thing is, okay, so first of all, the general conflict between Nintendo and the community is misframed by a lot of people. They think it's Nintendo hates competitive Smash Brothers and these guys love competitive Smash Brothers, and that's the core conflict. That's not the core conflict. The core conflict is that Nintendo wants to have control over competitive Smash Brothers, and the community does not want to give them control. That's the core conflict, right? The community, that is actually what's happening. Nintendo wants the Smash community to basically be their perfect image, which they can use for product marketing to sell Switches and sell more Smash Brothers copies, so that they can have what they want out of the tournaments to make it perfect, which is why you see the Smash Invitationals. Again, there has been investment where they run events themselves. They run tournaments themselves sometimes. Now they give like no prize pool, but that is what they do. The thing is, the community's values and what they find important and what they want out of events is so opposed to what Nintendo wants out of events, is that there's constant conflict. Nintendo doesn't want prize pools. They don't want people being paid, right?
No, because remember, they want, again, the Japanese company. For one, they're looking at their own laws and they're saying that shit is illegal. On Nintendo side, the Japanese side of things, what we are doing with these tournaments is illegal in their own country. You cannot do that in Japan. You have to get licenses, and they consider it like gambling. So you could see on Nintendo's side, they're afraid that the world is seeing them engaging in something that they don't think is quite right or they don't approve of. And so their natural instinct, especially Nintendo, is we want to make sure this is going by our rules, that they're following our guidelines very specifically. That would be my read on them.
And the thing is that if we said, okay, we'll just run tournaments like Nintendo wants us to, we'd be playing free-for-all with items with like the worst, like with no prize pools, with Nintendo backpacks as our prizing. This is and with commentary and with a production which basically doesn't reflect the values when we're not talking about advanced play, and all of a sudden like things start, we start like having an entirely different look to the scene that the community doesn't want, right? And tools like Slippy, for example, would then have to be not promoted, and you all of a sudden can't grow the community in ways which are great for the community at large, but bad for Nintendo, right? So there's like this core conflict at play here.
Let me give you like a good like way to think about it. I guess because I don't not sympathize with. I'm a Melee boy myself. It's not a question of do I agree with the principles of the Smash community. I absolutely do. I probably agree with them harder than most people, independently of the Smash community itself. Like, yeah, I'm definitely a person who promotes emulation, who promotes all kinds of things that people are like, no, don't do that. But it's more of a question of strategy, tactics, planning. Let me give you a good example. So let's say you're making a ROM hack like AM2R, something that Nintendo, they are not going to like this. They are not going to like that we're doing this. Do you go on Twitter, post pics of it in development and say, hey guys, I'm working on, or like a Fox in Space, remember that? Hey guys, I'm working on this project and it's involving Nintendo IP copyrights and stuff. If you want to support me, go ahead and follow this link. Versus what I would suggest if you're going to do something like that is covertly, under wraps, work on it, make it, create it, and then just release it. And then it's too late. It already exists, and Nintendo, they can cease and desist you, but the internet is forever. And once it gets on there, they can cease desist, and you can be like, whoa, sorry, my bad. But it's too late. It's already out there. Versus if you show them your hand, they can cut you right at the feet. And then if you try to proceed, now you're going to get sued. So that's what I'm wondering about, like some of the Smash communities, like approaches to these questions of like, let's have a protest. Let's make the biggest fuss possible. I feel like you're just taking a stick and you're hitting the bee's nest, like smack. And anyway, not to interrupt you, but just to clarify my thoughts.
So, I see what you're saying for sure. And by the way, those covert approaches have been done too. Like when UCF was first introduced to the scene, it was uncovertly, it was unstealth. It was like, hey, we're at a Nintendo licensed event. We're not gonna make it look like it's UCF, but it's on every console, and hush, it's not officially in any Rulesets. No one tweets about it, no one talks about it. A lot of these things do happen in ways that we know that there's conflict.
So I would say a good is Slippy. Like my opinion would be, you keep Slippy. The cat's out of the bag now, but I would have said keep Slippy on the down low. We do not talk about this. We do not mention this anywhere. And so once you're in, we can once you're in the scene, you'll know about it. Or when you know. But almost give yourself what's called plausible deniability, so that when Nintendo comes knocking and they said, "Are you guys promoting Slippy? Are you guys promoting modification and pirating of our game?" As the Smash leadership, you can say, "Slippy? What do you speak? What madness is?" I don't go on the internet. I have no idea what you're talking about. I feel like, plausible deniability could be a good tool in these types of conversations, rather than, hey everyone, Slippy's awesome.
Right. I mean, the thing is, though, is like what you're describing is, for example, let's say we set a strategy where there is like a Melee Discord where we say, Harry, everyone join this, and when you're in that, you get PM'd about this Slippy thing. So first of all, it's a great thought, but there's Nintendo operatives literally at our events, and they're a little more plugged in than, unfortunately, they will know about it. Second of all, we genuinely want people in the world to know about this amazing development because it grows our game, right?
But
so
what I'm saying is, can you have your cake and then can you eat your cake? Or can you only have one or the other? Like, can you be both homebrew, rogues, and also be esports? That's I think the conflict that the community is running into is that it wants to be both. It wants to be like homebrew, badass, sick, but then it also wants to be esports. What do you think about that thought? That maybe these two goals just cannot coexist with one another. Melee cannot both be homebrew and badass and esports at once.
I agree. I think that for the most part, if you talk to people in, like, let's say Smash leadership or whatever, there isn't really one. It's just a bunch of different people.
Yeah, explain that real quick. How does this work? Because to me, from the outside, I just assume like there's a secret like Discord. You all join and you get brands on your arms and that's how it happened.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I'm in chats with all those guys, all the other the people who run tournaments and all that. and that's all we have. But ultimately, everyone makes their own decisions and all that. There was a time where we were much more unified.
And would you say that time was better in terms of community leadership versus now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, but it took a ton of management, and frankly, that was like a time where I was like insanely active with it. It's like when there was, I'd say like up until like 2019 was when it was really uniform, and then it stopped being for various reasons.
Well, one of it is because we're going to talk about this next. I'm going to prime the audience. Is the nature of Melee is quite different than the nature of most competitive games, where you need a much more hands-on role in Melee than you do Tekken, or you do even King of Fighters or something. Because like, let's say if I wanted to run Tekken competitively in my state or something, Tekken does so much of this for you. Tekken has how it's played competitively built into the game. The rule sets built into the game. The developers are doing as much as they can to support the competitive play of Tekken. So all I literally have to do is connect people and show up and hand them, PS4s or whatever we're playing on. Like, I don't have to do all this, sophisticated rule set management and all the, I could see Melee being so much more complex to manage because it's a fan-made meta, not a natural meta.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the core problems is that there's an ecosystem, but there's not an economy, right? So you have these people like me who've been basically for like decades or for a very long time involved in the governance of a community.
And people like you need to get way more credit, by the way. I just saying this as someone who does a little bit to even foster shmups. Get me to travel around. That's like a big deal. And the Melee guys, you guys are insane. You guys are top tier level, like, dedication that I don't think any other scene can come close to. It is insane. And yet, whenever you talk to people about Melee and Smash, it's all about the top players and the dramas and all that stuff. But like the people underneath holding this whole structure up that are basically not paid, getting nothing, getting no recognition. I feel like that's one reason why Melee has decayed over the past few years, is because the people holding this shit up get no recognition or support. It's all about the people on top, the e-celebs, rather than the people on the bottom.
Right. I mean, I completely agree with that. I actually think the number one problem right now for Smash's growth, or lack of, or one of the hardest things for it to solve, is the brain drain. So what we see constantly is people who would gain skills through the Smash community, and then they would get poached by other games or esports or whatever to have jobs somewhere else. Yeah.
In that position, I would do the same. So if I was someone who dedicated that much to Smash, and then Tekken walked up to me and said, "Bro, you want to work with Tekken?" I would immediately go to Tekken because the environment seems so much better. It's like you're moving from the internship to the real job. So I can't even fault people who jump out of Melee because it seems so grueling versus the other side where it could be pretty sweet.
Right, exactly. There's an actual economy and people are getting actual jobs, right? And, there's no jobs, and even though there's a ton of work to be done, there's no jobs and money in the Smash scene because Nintendo stifled it so much, right?
Yeah, where would you even generate revenue? It would only be via tournament attendance, right? Like the actual venue fees, right?
Ticket sales.
Is that your only avenue of monetization? Besides donations, you got donations and you've got venue fees. Is that basically it?
There's sponsorships, but it's hard to get sponsorships when there's a lack of unification in the scene. And when, again, Nintendo makes it so that getting large money checks and sponsorships can be hard to clear because those sponsors know that, hey,
think of YouTube. If you promote a product on YouTube, YouTube wants a cut of that. So you can imagine you do a big sponsorship, Nintendo's knocking immediately. Hey, we want a cut.
So it's very hard to be sustainable. There was Beyond the Summit, which was a sustainable business for a little while, which did a lot of Smash stuff. They did other esports.
I would say it's the donations that kept them going.
It did a lot, right? Because they had like this voting system that was basically a donation system.
Like they kind of had the best strategy. Would you say in your analysis? Like their strategy was the best. It kind of avoided a lot of these issues and kind of relied on the goodwill of the community, basically, right? Or am I wrong about that?
No, you're not wrong. Is that basically having some sort of communal fund go towards and feed back into it. So you have some people full-time working on growing the ecosystem was great. But like the truth be told is that like it's extremely hard in all of esports and all of gaming to have a sustainable business. And in Smash, right, without publisher money, Smash Bros is even harder because you have your publisher actively against you. Right, it's the only game where the publisher is actively trying to like, mess with you. So
that is so Nintendo though. Like that is the most Nintendo thing in the universe. The fact that Nintendo is so powerful and successful that they're literally trying to shut down their own competitive scene. That is so like I imagine Sega in that place. I'm not the biggest Sega fanboy, but just imagine Sega in that place. Sega is begging people. They're walking around with tin cups. Please play Virtua Fighter. I beg you. And the world's like, yeah, Virtua Fighter's fine. Meanwhile, people are dying to play Smash Brothers. Nintendo's like trying to slap down that as much as possible. It is, in a sick way, it is kind of funny. But yeah, in the actual position, I'm sure it's brutal and awful.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. Ultimately, I've accepted it. I think there is a handful of ways of getting out of it. There's actually only really one true way, which is actually just making a new game. Like if someone made a true spiritual successor, like had the melee mechanics in it, or a clone like Dota 2 is for Dota 1, that would actually unchain the scene. But it's just so much work and so much investment that it hasn't been done.
But do
as
you
far
think
as the actual game itself,
but
it's really hard to get
Speaking of someone from a scene kind of like what you're describing, so what's interesting is that like in melee conversations, I think melee players don't understand that. Yeah, they have one beast against them, the machine that is Nintendo, but then they have like this magic well that bursts from the earth, which is the power of the Nintendo IP and how much built-in marketing is built in that IP. For example, Virtua Fighter, in my opinion, is one of the greatest fighting games of all time. And there's no Sega breathing over your neck stopping you from making Virtua Fighter an esport. They're even begging you, please do it. But it doesn't have that power of Nintendo to just funnel people in constantly, because Nintendo is so powerful as an IP. You don't have to do any discovery. You don't have to do any marketing. People just flock to it like birds. They can't get enough of it. Right. And so it's like this really weird situation with Melee. But what I'm saying is the other side of that could be more difficult than you think, because let's say someone makes this melty blood bitchin' Melee style follow-up, and now the beast of Nintendo is gone, but you also lost that well of magic. And what could literally happen, and this is the tragedy of fighting games, that's why I made that video, is what could literally happen is that Nintendo's esports scene of lame scrubs playing Ultimate will still obliterate your badass niche new Melee game because of the just the casual influx versus, you're probably going to have to go door to door like Jehovah's Witnesses or something.
Yeah, and therefore you see the problem. Basically, if the only way to get out of Nintendo's chain is to basically not have Nintendo IP, now you lower the scale of your scene by such an incredible amount because you don't have Nintendo IP. Unless your new game isn't some sort of indie thing and you are able to get a ton of investment and a ton of quality, unless it can hit a bar of quality that's like absurd. Like you make a new League of Legends, right? Technically, Riot Games was a small company at some point, and then they made League of Legends, which was new IP and new characters, and that became bigger than Dota ever was, right? It was big. Dota was in the Blizzard cage, right? There is an equivalent in gaming. Dota was in the Blizzard cage, then Dota 2 came around as a remake, and then Riot made League of Legends, and that became new.
I'm trying to give you the outsider perspective of this, which is the audience of people playing Dota are probably by nature kind of hardcore motherfuckers because they're PC gaming. So like telling them, okay, go from Dota to League of Legends, open a new EXE on your computer, versus like Nintendo people, Smash people, they're in the Nintendo ecosystem. And so like that, I just don't think that natural selection is as natural for them, because like getting them to leave that Nintendo ecosystem probably be a little bit more challenging.
It's not perfect. I'm not telling you this is like there's great solutions. I'm just saying if that happened, it's like the only way to get out. Certainly it'd be tough. I don't know. But what I can tell you is that unless something like that happens, it's going to be an eternal war. You're going to hear about this 10 years from now. Unless
If
something like
Nintendo,
that
well,
happens.
unless Nintendo just destroys you. There's that
Yeah,
possibility.
probably not. I think realistically, if you just look at the 22 years, we're 22 years in, right?
But you've
The
also
truth of the
mentioned
matter
the
is-
old heads are getting tired and the brain drain. Again, outsider
That's
perspective.
the bigger threat.
Yeah.
That's the bigger threat.
That's what
The
I'm saying.
bigger threat-
Outsider perspective is is there a new flock of blurs out there? Is there a new flock of, Bobby Scars and these types out there to hold up the scene the way you guys did? Or is it once you guys call it quits and you're like, okay, I'm just going to go work at Tekken or something. I've had enough of this. Will that ecosystem just collapse in on itself? Which I have seen happen. So it's not to be too negative, but I just feel like maybe you guys don't understand how much value you guys actually, because you don't get any credit. I think the community heads maybe don't know how hard it would be to probably replace you guys.
I agree that the bigger threat isn't actually Nintendo, because I think, again, to frame it correctly, Nintendo doesn't actually hate the competitive scene. They want to use the competitive scene. So they'll forever not, like, they won't shut everything down. First of all, they can't really go into everyone's house and take their Wiis and GameCubes, right? Like, realistically, and their computers, it's cat's out of the bag to some degree, and like, so
you guys are so
realistically-
lucky you made Slippy before Nintendo knew. If he posted dev of Slippy and Nintendo found out about that, but yeah, the
would've
cat's
shut
out of the
down
bag
before
now,
now.
baby.
Cat's out of the bag, and so, like, realistically, that's not a real threat. Now, Nintendo, though, stifling the monetization of the scene such that it becomes obscenely difficult to, like, have good paid professionals is the biggest threat of Nintendo's influence at this point, right? Because it's tough to have people dedicate their lives for decades on decades without end in sight. And, like, is that new generation going to keep it? Now, I will say, I mean, I still, end of the day, I was at a tournament last weekend and 2 weeks ago. So, and there are tournament organizers, which I have to meet for the first time still, right? So there's some crazy people out there, and they're young, right? So it does happen. And the interesting thing is, they know the deal. Like, when I started, we didn't know that it was
Uncharted. But almost
Yeah.
almost in a way though, that could have been much more of a blessing than a curse. Like your naiveness might have been a good thing rather than a bad thing. Because if you knew from the start, this is how it's going to play out, maybe you would have been, I'll play Marvel or something.
Absolutely. I think that there is a degree where the brain drain is accelerated because it's like, look at the deal you're proposing to people when there was an esports dream, when there was a career outlook, was a lot better than in the contemporary view where everyone knows you're just volunteering for free and this is a side thing you're doing for basically nothing, right? And so the value prop for getting a new generation person is less. But even in that scenario, even in the scenario where we can't get new blood and we can't convince enough new people to run tournaments, there's still the world that it can be a side game at a FGC tournament, because that's just such a low cost for them. And and as long as you still have the audience, as long as you still have people who are buying, tickets to Combo Breaker or whatever, the scene will still continue and exist, just not in its own independent events.
That would have been so if I were to crystal ball the future of competitive Melee, my crystal ball is that it will eventually look a lot like Third Strike, where the esports dream, I'm talking specifically Melee, not Smash, because I think the newer Smash games will have their own avenue that they go down, but I think Melee will end up in kind of what I call like the fighting game retirement home, where you're not dead. I'm not saying anyone's dead. Third Strike's still kicking and still, relevant to the people who care. But, the days of being on ESPN and the days of, being able to make your career in Melee, this is my crystal ball. I think those days will probably come to an end because of the forces against the game. But what are your thoughts?
So, yes, that's possible. And I think that is basically what I've alluded to, as that could be where it goes. And by the way, that's not a horrible end, because it's had 22 years, right? Like,
that you're now the Electric Underground.
Right.
Your fate
So it's
is my existence already. So it's not so bad over here. You're not getting on esports pages and stuff, but you're still around.
People are still playing, and Slippy still exists, and there's going to be new innovations. And by the way, whatever, if that future exists, it's like 10 years down the road. So it would be the slowest decline because realistically, the player numbers and the audience is still there, and these independent TOs are still out there. The big houses and the Genesis, all these mainstays guys are still running tournaments, right? So if that happens, it would happen very slowly, right? Extremely slowly, with a lot of time to adjust and course correct if we need to.
Unless Nintendo manages to poach your audience.
With a new game or something.
Yes, with a new game, and they poach Melee. Well, because I feel like on the ground, I think Melee players don't understand how much Smash 5 poached them. Because I saw my Melee scene literally dissect because of Smash 5. There was prior to Smash 5, everyone was all excited and playing Smash 5 came out. And they're like, it was like an escape hatch for most of them. Because they're like, I'm sick of Mark beating the shit out of me every weekly, and I feel like I'm not getting any better, and this guy's just doming us, and we're sick of it. And it's like a new meta now, and my entire local Melee scene melted. It's gone. It no longer exists because they all went to Smash 5, and then the old cranky bastards like myself, we just play other games now, like Tekken or whatever, because it gets a little old when it's me and my friend. Yeah.
Overall, locals aren't what they used to be because people use Slippy now. Like, that's like, why drive an hour to go to a local tournament when you can just get your practice online?
And then some dude pairs you up against your friend in pools, round one. You're like, hey, we drove here together. No, you're not ranked. This happened to me. Pool match your friend that you drove over here, bastard.
So majors, like larger tournaments, have a little bit heightened importance compared to the past, whereas locals were like the vast majority of the scene. So there's that aspect. But I want to go back to like, okay, there's that one future, which is it could just become that slow decline into, which is like not even a bad end, realistically. Like, that would mean we lasted like 30 some odd years, which is like unheard of already, right?
Yeah, I think people also underestimate how, like, if you're willing to drop off the esports ladder, like, Third Strike is like kicking pretty good.
It's fine.
It's fine, but you can't be esports. That's what I'm saying. Like, you're no longer on the esports merry-go-round anymore.
Sure. Having said that, there is another alternative universe, which is the one that seems very possible too, which is that because Melee is in particular, and Smash overall, but specifically Melee, has an incredible content basis to it, and a lot of gamers know its personalities. This is the thing that always shocks me, because basically, like, when you go to any gaming sphere, like, I don't get recognized that often, like, in walking around. But if I go to an anime convention, I go to a gaming convention, like, it feels like everyone knows me. Sure, it's not like it's like F tier still, but like when Mango, Hungrybox, all those guys legitimately, like, so here's the thing with that, right? Melee in particular has produced a lot of the largest content creators, has a lot of allies within the content creator space. So we're talking about Moist Critical, we're talking about Ludwig, we're talking about like Atrioc. The list is really long. Slime, etc.
You guys are deep in Twitch. There's something going on there. I won't press you too much, but Melee and Twitch, there's some backdoor stuff there.
There is for sure that, and the loyalty in that is very large. Those people stick together, and so we're seeing, for example, we saw recently Off-Brand basically bought the remnants of BTS, right? Their studio and all that. So even if there is no great sustainable future, if there becomes enough big content creators that come out of the ecosystem because the audience,
you basically become sort of I know exactly what you're saying, because my channel is kind of like this actually, where like my YouTube channel supplements the shmup event I do. If my YouTube channel did not exist, the shmup event could not exist, because I create natural marketing, I create natural awareness of it, and yes, so like you guys could be sort of like the passion project, I guess, or like the passion thing for big YouTubers and streamers and stuff like that. The scary part about that, though, is that I'm on the other side of that as a small YouTuber, but the other side of that is, as a YouTuber, and these types, I'm sure, at that level, like, they also have to kind of be geared into the ecosystem at large. If they need to change direction because, okay, Melee's too costly for me now, or it's not pulling in the interest it once was, like, it's a little scary, because if they change direction, that could be you don't have that grassroots foundation anymore, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you're relying on this content creator base, but there's a network effect, right? like because the Melee guys for whatever reason, or the Smash guys are very well connected with the other ecosystems, with the FGC, with content creators, with Twitch itself, with all these things. Because of that, they're like getting opportunities for growth just through pure partnership work, by purely literally asking for favors and doing that like continually and doing that long term is still a reasonable outcome for a game that has an audience, right? Like if end of the day you're a content creator and you want to get a stream that gets 50k viewers, 60k viewers, an option is Melee, an option is Smash Brothers, to run a Smash Brothers tournament. That's still something you could do.
But the scary part is, what if Nintendo gets in that dish? Like, what if Ludwig starts getting calls, cease and desist from Nintendo?
That could happen, but the thing is that is, again, another PR thing that Nintendo would have to think about, right? Are they willing to go against the biggest gaming content creators in the world? They haven't done it yet. Maybe they will be.
I would say remember what I was saying earlier? Don't smack that bee's nest. I'm saying put the stick down, Blur. Put it down. Don't smack the bee's nest.
This could be a precursor to that impending...
Yeah. I'm just saying because I could see Nintendo just going scorched earth. I could see them doing that.
I mean, realistically, the truth of the matter is that I think that direction is what is happening in the ecosystem. So people, like, these content creators are going to run Smash Brothers tournaments. They already have, and they're planning to already. Like, literally next month, Lud is running a big tournament.
The distinction, I want to make the distinction for listeners out there. The distinction is that these content creators like Ludwig and stuff, they have a foundation of revenue and a foundation of support that is outside of the world of Smash. Ludwig is not the top tier streamer personality he is because of Melee. It's like this weird, he like began in Melee, then he went out and made his own house and he made millions like Gatsby, and then he's coming back. He's coming home with his millions and saying, buddies, look what I got.
Yeah. There's even cases of homegrown ones where, well, I mean, his audience was what it was at the beginning because of the Smash scene. But like even like Hungrybox, right? Like Hungrybox, all his content is Smash, but he's running tournaments now with coin boxes. Like the last tournament I just commentated, literally last weekend, yesterday, was on Mango and Hungrybox's stream, right? It was broadcast on content creator streams.
My question is, could Melee produce Hungrybox now? Melee had its esports era that was red hot, and I think in that era it created Mango, Hungrybox, I guess Leffen for better or for worse. Like it made these celebrities, but could Melee replace them? Let's say Hungrybox is like, okay, I've had enough of this Smash stuff. I actually want to get on with my life and stream and do other things. And then Mango hangs it up and says, I'm like a rock star. Why am I playing, Smash when I could be probably world famous doing other things? What happens then if they decide to hang up the gloves? That's kind of I think a scary prospect for Melee especially.
I mean, it is true, sure, but I think like we're looking at those personalities after 15 years of it being cultivated. What happens when Jmook is on year 15 of his career? Like, will we view him the same way, right?
Well, I would beg to differ because, like, think of fighting games. This is a good example. We all know Daigo, Tokido, Mago. They made their bones in, Third Strike, Street Fighter 2, and all these types of things like that. I'm talking specifically Melee, not Smash. I think Smash outside of Melee will be fine. I'm talking specifically Melee. Who is the world's best Third Strike player now? Who are the up-and-comers of Third Strike? If you are in the Third Strike world, I'm sure you know. Do I know? I have no clue. And so Jmook, if I walk into a room with my FGC friends and I say, Jmook's sick, right? They'll be like, who? Who is Jmook? Versus if I walk in and say, Mango's sick, right? They'll be like, Mango, yeah, he's the GOAT. He's the man. Because he's got that. I just wonder, though, because of that esports era, is that intensity, the ESPN articles, the esports articles, all about Mango and Hungrybox and how they want to fist fight in the parking lot, all that stuff, could that be transposed into the next generation of players like the Zanes and the Jmooks? I'm not quite sure if they could ever touch the heights of Melee's Mangos and stuff.
It'll be hard because, like, what you're mentioning is, like, I think there's a lot of data behind this, like, in terms of jersey sales and actual, like, player recognition. Cloud9's most recognized player in their history, including their League of Legends team, is Mango.
Everyone knows who Mango is, but like,
And
you guys,
gaming, just everyone knows
Melee,
who he
he
is,
talks
right?
about like how important he is to Melee, and people have their feelings about it. But in my opinion, you guys got like Michael Jordan of online personalities in your game. Like, so much I think of Melee can be connected specifically to him as far as his star power. Like, in another scenario, could I see like a Hungrybox being a giant celebrity? I don't think so. I think Melee, the context of Melee is what made him. Mango, you stick him in anywhere, any place. The guy's a star, is what I'm saying. Like, that star power, it's not easy to find. That's quite a find.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to hear that from my perspective because I knew him for a decade.
Yeah, you know him personally, but I only know him as a viewer. So it's funny to hear the difference.
And I think like it's, by the way, same thing for Hungrybox. Like if you look at Team Liquid, these are the two of the biggest esports teams. Like who's like the player that they find the most valuable, who had the most watch hours in terms of their whole brand? It's actually Hungrybox, a Smash Brothers player.
See, I'm giving you my honest reads, but I almost wonder if a lot of Hungrybox's fame is connected to Mango's fame and personality. Like if he was not in Mango's life, could he have had the personality and charisma to become as famous as he is? Or the fact that he's paired with Mango is, that's my point.
Yeah,
I could be wrong, but I feel like of the two, the clear star of the two is Mango.
I think there's also like a general point you're making, which is basically like, hey, there was this heyday, right? And of like roughly 2015 to 2018. Evo to the last. I'd say Evo to the last Evo, like your Evo era, basically. When you started at Evo and then when you ended Evo. So and I think the numbers show that it was like probably where Melee itself was peaked. Now, what it is now isn't very like a far cry from that. It's if anything, and there's a lot of things that are better about the scene on an ecosystem basis, like specifically Slippy.
Which give and tournaments and all that stuff. Yeah,
and the content creator base, like I said. And it should be said that players are getting paid, like the contracts that players get now is still better than back then, right? So like there are certain things in the ecosystem that are better. There are certain things that are worse. Right, like TOs make less money now than back then, and they didn't make much before.
Because of tournament attendance, right? Because tournament attendance is down. I don't go to tournaments. I used to. I don't.
Commentators are basically unpaid for the most part at this year. That's a very new development. Whereas like in previous years, like they'd always fly you out. They'd always do. So a lot of that stuff has declined for sure, and you see declines in other ways.
But it makes sense though, because the commentators are getting paid from the TOs, and if the TOs aren't getting paid, venue fee. Then commentator, right?
Right, exactly. So like basically like there is ecosystem changes, but I don't think we're at a point where we're like so drastic enough to be able to say like we know for a fact that like it's going to head the third strike direction for the next decade. I think in fact, I still think it's like based on what we're seeing, especially with moves with like the recent news about off-brand buying the remnants of BTS, like I mentioned. I still think that the other futures are very possible. And I think especially if there are ways of making it so that, that content creator base is really where we make our money. And if there is like a great basis of effectively community donations and a pool of money, whether it is through Twitch subs or whatever, to basically fuel the engine that is like these tournaments, which, won't have great prizing ever, then I see futures where the game can grow despite that. Will it get huge? Will it get like the NFL?
No, I would say, I guess the question is, will it keep up with its peers in the fighting game genre? Because I don't expect it to exceed them. Will it keep up with Tekken and Street Fighter? Will it keep up or will it fall off? I'm a little bit more skeptical because I feel like if Mango quits specifically, there's going to be a giant mango-shaped hole in the ecosystem, and that could be trouble.
Sure, and for a lot of that big period of the last decade, Smash has been bigger than them, by the way, right? Like, Smash has had bigger attendance and larger viewership.
I listened to old Avoiding the Puddle podcast, so that's Eris's podcast. It's a Tekken podcast, and they are hardcore. The episodes we're on now are Evo 2015 and stuff, and it is so funny to hear them talk about Smash, because this was the beginning of the Smash esports era, and Eris is like, these Melee players are insane. They're carrying around CRTs. There's thousands of them. I don't even understand this. We're begging people to play. We have full publisher support. We have full support from Namco, and these are in Melee are showing up with CRTs and outnumbering us. It's like Melee in the FGC brain is such a weird exception. My explanation of that is actually I think Melee has a lot more in common with speedrunning and the rise of speedrunning than being a FGC phenomenon, but I won't go on about that.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is like, if you look at all the games in all of esports, the one that seems to be going up, whereas everything else seems to be trending down, is FGC. Like, Street Fighter 6 is coming, Tekken's coming, Mortal Kombat, new Mortal Kombat's coming. Evo has like a solid ownership with Sony, and like RTS, which is a company that like has a lot of good investment behind it. So like,
but there's a scary explanation for this that Melee players aren't going to like, which is that on the FGC side of things, Tekken, Street Fighter, the publishers are now coming in, and the publishers are helping big time. And I think what could happen for Smash, absolutely, is Nintendo comes in and they help the new Smash game. And they funnel this new community leadership of the new Smash. That's my prediction of the new Smash game, is you guys are going to get cut from the new Smash, and they're going to replace you with a whole new cast and a whole new ecosystem of people. And then Melee is going to be like floating in the world of Third Strike, out by itself. That's my prediction of what Nintendo's going for.
That could definitely happen. I mean, and I'd be very happy for the Smash 6 players, honestly. Like, I guess, truth be told, I don't think Nintendo, knowing their history, are they going to do a good job? I mean, maybe I won't be happy.
But Nintendo fans take so much abuse. That's the thing. It's like, do they have to even do a good job? Nintendo fans will put up with God knows what amount of abuse, and they just keep coming back,
Sure. But I mean, the history is really bad. In terms of the events that Nintendo itself has ran in terms of Smash, it hasn't gotten good viewership, it hasn't gotten great attendance, and they haven't like really put investment in. So maybe you're right. Maybe they'll finally do it. And
wasn't one kind of symptom of that there was a big controversy, not to put you in the middle of a controversy, but wasn't a kind of symptom of that? My reading of it was the whole Panda thing, where that was kind of like the part where it was the divider of, okay, now which path do you choose? The left, which fork, and if you'd gone down the Panda path, you would have ended up in what Nintendo, I think, is aiming for. So what I'm saying is they're coming for you. I'm not saying like some dude's gonna show up from Japan with a suitcase in his hand and try to run an event. I'm saying a TO of the Smash scene as you know it is gonna get a DM from Nintendo, and they're gonna be like, this is the path, baby. This is the golden ticket.
And now I think since we're talking more deep into the discussion, I think you're seeing the reason why there being such a public outcry is a unifying force. So, like you mentioned with the Panda thing, right? There was a route where that just won. It's an eternal war. It never ends.
Don't start. That's what I'm saying about smacking the bee's nest. Okay, you guys won the battle. You guys don't need to run and smack the bee's nest after you do it. Just win the battle, take the W, and quietly retreat back to your position. That would be my point.
It is, by the way, the first W ever in the 22 years. Because here's the
other W is the Evo, though. The Evo, they shut down Evo.
W. You can call that a W. But the thing is in this case, that one was a pure W because Nintendo really wanted Panda to succeed. Like, they really wanted to have an operator in the scene as their lackey that basically did everything they said and kind of did things their way, right? Because the truth is...
Will they start implementing this legally? Not just, hey, you're our buddy, but can't you see a future? I foresee a future where Nintendo will literally require you to license with them to run an event.
First of all, they've already done that. That's not a future. That's been the present for a while. So the big tournaments, even now, even though they all dislike Nintendo, will still get licensed. That's still a thing. The difference is, because of public outcry and because of the general feeling towards Nintendo can't ask for as much. The position of the TOs become a little bit better, and the licensing won't be as public, right? So Nintendo can't, like, you won't see Nintendo booths necessarily at those events because the TOs will be like, hey, like, people will boycott our event, and Nintendo will be like, yeah, I think they will. Right?
Yeah. I mean, you guys. What I'm saying is, you won that battle. But my point is that the arsenal of Nintendo is very powerful and very deep.
It will not end. It will not end. And the thing with the public outcry that's also happened though is it makes it so that a new Panda, like let's say a new operator comes around and says, I'm going to raise a bunch of money, I'm going to do all this stuff, and I'm going to be Nintendo's best friend, and I'm going to do the same vision that Panda had. Now that's much harder for that operator, for that third party, to want to do that.
If you're not around and the old Melee heads aren't around and that ecosystem gets opened, like Nintendo is not going anywhere. They are this monolith.
Oh, yeah.
They are this giant. And so you can see like in the near future, as long as Blur's keeping his eye on the Coast Guard, he can keep things somewhat
It's not
maintained.
OP.
Yeah,
It's
or
not
whoever.
OP.
The Melee Illuminati. The Melee Illuminati keep an eye on things. But as soon as you guys, some of you start retiring, some of you start getting tired, and then there's this lane, and no one is in that lane, and Nintendo just shoves in their chosen slot. That's the thing I'm talking about. Is that it's a long game.
Sure, but you said the next Smash game, right? I don't think those guys are going anywhere for that, and that could be that's probably the next like 3 years, right? So like who knows, right?
Nintendo seems to really like milking games for long now. Yeah.
Sure. Right? I actually predict that the next Smash game is going to be, they're going to, on the Switch 2 or whatever new console they make, they're going to do like Mario Kart, where they're just going to re-release Ultimate with like some new features and maybe some new DLC.
And they'll get away with it. It's Nintendo. They can do it. They'll do it.
But if they do that, that won't have the same splash as a real Smash 6 will, like in terms of like bolstering the scene. So, and maybe it won't come with the same hooks in terms of Nintendo marketing budget. And what they would want out of it, right? So that it'll be interesting to see how they go with that. Nonetheless, I think like the general sentiment of the community is pretty entrenched now. Of like, even if let's say I leave the scene, tons of other people like me who are like-minded may go leave the scene. I think the general sentiment of an organizer going and doing exactly what Panda did. Like, people can read the internet. Like, this was so highly publicized, especially within the scene.
The problem is that I do not have the faith in the public that you do. I do not trust the public's consciousness and, like, interest as strongly. I feel like the public is very, very swayable. A funny example of this was actually, wasn't it when after they shut down a big house, they were going to do this big Nintendo boycott, and like a week later everyone's buying the new DLC for Smash, the new Smash game, and everyone's like, oh, sick. Like, the public consciousness for this thing is so, their bandwidth, the bandwidth of the public consciousness is so short that in your head you're like, never forget Panda. 1 year from now they could forget Panda. 1 year from now they'd be like, the whole lesson could be completely lost on the public.
And I think like, again though, we're seeing like why the continued drama has a purpose in the scene in a way, because like basically the general gaming public knowing that there's this conflict and knowing that there is this constant tension and it never really being let up and it being an eternal struggle like we're talking about has genuine purpose, because you kind of need people to never forget. Because once they do, then it could, all of a sudden they can get away with the same tomfoolery that they really want to, right? But if there's that constant tension and if there's that constant outcry, then realistically no one could get away with it, and it would be very unlikely for it to happen, because Nintendo themselves operating at the level of like running the entire scene, they're not only not capable of doing that, but they don't want to do that, right? They want someone on the inside who knows the TOs and knows the ins and outs and knows what's necessary to run it for them.
But
so they
what if
need
they
a
can
Benedict
offer
Arnold.
that person a career that the community
They tried,
can't?
right?
Well,
They
I'm saying,
tried.
but that's just a potent weapon. they have.
Oh,
That is so potent.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you get one, but how long can that sustain before someone finally signs the check and it works? Because
That is scary.
for me, I don't really trust the public at large to be your bastion of defense, because they're so iffy and easily swayed, and I've seen social media like turn on dimes at times. Like the public can turn on a dime if enough happens, or if there's enough incentive for them to do so. That's why I would say like finding backup strats for this would probably be a good idea. because
True.
I just don't know if you can trust the public at large to be your final
Right,
defense.
right. I mean, for sure. And they have, they have their weapons. I think that the Smash community, like, shouldn't be underestimated either. They have their weapons, like, they have their big content creators, and they have all that. Like, there is something to either side. I don't think anyone's ever going to flat out win. Nintendo almost won. Like, if Panda
I think
just
they
straight
could
up
win
won,
in future Smash games, but
it's
that's
possible.
a more pessimistic view.
It's unlikely that the Smash community like gets everything they want in terms of full independence because just the way IP law works. Unless IP law changes, or there's some landmark court case, it's unlikely. But Nintendo not winning is the status that I think a lot of them want, and at the moment, that's still the case, right? Stalemate is a win for the community, right? Like,
yeah, it is, because they
basically,
don't want you around. So if you're existing, you're winning in a way.
If you're existing, you're winning, right? Like, so ultimately, if you think about it that way, it's 22 years of straight dubs, of straight winning, right? And they haven't controlled the scene for 22 straight years. They've tried many times,
Yeah.
and they've failed every time.
It's a goddamn miracle. That's all I can say. It's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
That's the real.
And-
They talk about the miracle of Melee. The miracle of Melee is not the dudes who programmed the game. It's the dudes that somehow made it a competitive game that people play outside of Nintendo's approval. That is the miracle of Melee right there.
Yeah, because they've tried their hardest to find a way to control this really large marketing vehicle that they could have, but because of basically their insistence on some of their policies, they haven't actually been able to capitalize on it. Like I said, I don't expect there's not a resolution. It's just more like people watching this video, you're gonna be hearing about this for a long time. If you're in gaming, you're probably gonna be hearing about it for a long time, because I think people are gonna still be passionate about this stuff. It's gonna be a sub community within the gaming sphere for a long time, and I don't think it's really going anywhere. But it's also not something that can really be resolved easily.
And one thing I will say, so I've been more critical of Melee community specifically because I want the Melee community to understand an outside perspective. It's not that I disagree. It's just like, you guys, it could be helpful for you guys to see the world a little bit outside your own ecosystem. But one thing I will say in support of the Melee community that I don't think people will say is that, in a very funny turn of irony, I think it is Nintendo's own doing that Melee community exists in the first place.
Oh, yeah.
Even though they don't want it to happen, because what Nintendo wants, they want the whole thing. Nintendo wants everything. So they want to be family friendly, but then they also want to appeal to adults. They want children and their parents. They want the whole unit. But children gamers and adult gamers are fundamentally different. Like how the Melee community is trying to be homebrew and esports at the same time. Nintendo is trying to be family and adult at the same time. And so they get themselves in these weird paradoxes where they make a game that they're aiming at children, but then adults are playing it because they're also aiming at adults, and then the adults are cutting into the child side of it. And so, yeah, it is a funny irony, and probably why this stalemate will continue, because Nintendo will probably continue this trend of marketing towards adults and children. So it's this weird limbo that both sides are stuck in.
So far, their new leadership and all that hasn't really seemed to change their mind. They're extremely slow, too. Like, they seem to be very unique in the gaming space, where you see all the other fighting game developers doing rollback netcode. We somehow don't expect that at Nintendo. That we see all these innovations.
This is just one branch of their giant empire.
We see all the other console developers have the graphics at a completely different standard.
Imagine a console with online gaming, and off the top of my head here, what if you put an Ethernet port in the console? Well, wouldn't that be a good idea, Blair,
Sure.
to put an Ethernet port in the console with online capability that you charge for?
They march to their own drum, and a lot of their games, especially historical ones, are very good. So we get it. Mario is dope. Zelda's dope. Metroid is dope. All these things are dope. I understand. I'm a gamer too, and so they're gonna be around. And so is the Smash community. It's hard to say where in terms of growth it'll be long term, but there are positive signs and there's negative signs, kind of like any other point in it. But what I can say is that people aren't done fighting. There's still tournaments. I can tell you a tournament happening pretty much every weekend coming up, and big tournaments happening every couple weeks. for like the next year. So
It feels like post Evo era, the connection between Melee and the general FGC seems less natural than it once was. That could be one thing Melee right now on their little itinerary of things to do that seem achievable. I think maybe Melee mending those bonds with the FGC in general would be a good direction, because I see that being a natural place for Melee to hang out, because like at my locals, Melee's gone, and Melee players forget it. It's gone. Yeah. Where it used to be, I used to be able to go play Tekken and then play some Melee, and I could do both. And for me now, kind of a ex-Melee player, I play it every now and again, but it's not enough to make me go to a tournament. But like, if a tournament had Tekken and Melee, I would enter both. But nowadays, the Tekken scene, no Melee. It's completely separated away. What are your thoughts on that, as far as the connection between FGC and Melee?
On a personal level, I agree with you, because I play a lot of traditional fighting games too. I want that. I want to be able to go and do both. First of all, as a commentator, I'm pretty good at some of them, right? I could be commentating those other games, but the problem is I'm spending all my time flying to Smash events, and I can't commentate the other games.
That'd be good for you. It'd make your life more sustainable, because you could go get paid to commentate Street Fighter, Tekken, X game, Melty Blood.
Yeah. I strongly. I push for a lot of things, in terms of making that happen. When we were all in the same roof for the Dream Hacks, Evos, we had a lot more tournaments where we were all in the same roof. The main thing that basically caused it to be hard to continue is, number one, Evo got bought by Sony, which made Nintendo never want. So basically, Smash is never going to be at Evo again. It's just never going to happen again. Not because Sony doesn't want to, but because Nintendo won't let it happen, right?
Yeah.
Because
remember, Nintendo thinks they're doing the event a favor rather than the other way around.
You're right. They're never going to give a Sony a license to run a Nintendo game. That's crazy. And to be fair to them, that is crazy. Right. I think Council Poster would think that to begin with. But even those other events, we saw a pretty good combo breaker with Smash. It had decent attendance. But the problem is, a lot of the other FGC events, when they include Smash, it's they'll do Smash as this side game with its own, with its schedule, just slotted in. And the product that players have when they go to an event, like Smash player has when they go to an FGC event, is simply so far inferior to Smash's own majors that it hasn't really caught on, and has been really hard to convince Smash players to want to spend $90.
It's kind of like going a little bit backwards from the Smash players' point of view. We're entering a time portal to 2010 now, or whatever.
It's why would I want to play our finals on Saturday at 2 p.m., right? And be in the corner of the room with...
I think Smash ult players, do whatever you want. I don't care about you. I'm talking to the Melee people out there. Maybe Melee players, probably not like the Mangos and the Leffens of the world, but the second tier Melee players, maybe you all should be a little bit more open to the idea of, okay,
sure,
we're going to have to make a little compromise here and play a combo breaker on Saturday, but you're getting Melee in that event, and you're getting, that crossover, which I think is super important.
I agree with you. I think it's good for the scene's growth, but I also know that that's a nice sentiment, but these things don't, people don't make decisions based on communal growth, really. When they're spending $90, they make decisions based on, should I go to Combo Breaker or should I go to Big House? And they pick Big House.
The rise to esports era, which I followed pretty closely, that would have been a sort of incentive for Melee, but now that Melee is this big, now that you've made it, basically, that drive, that hunger isn't quite there the same way. Because I can see in the past that actually motivating a Melee player to go, I want to just, because Melee players, I was one of them, we're like agents, we're Jehovah's Witnesses. We didn't infiltrate your event, and we're ready to party. Yeah. So,
what I would like is, to work with FGC organizers to make it so that the product that they're giving to Smash Playable is a little bit more close to the standard that they're seeing at Smash events, so that, they'll win out of it too. If they get Smash attendance, they're gonna make more money, and ultimately, I think that's what it would take. Yeah, entry fees. That's what it would take for it to really happen. But so far, right now, the FGC organizers have their hands full. They're getting that sweet Street Fighter money. Their entry fees are going to be they're going to break every record and then some. right? They don't even know if they'll be able to fit everyone. It's really the truth of the matter. It's like how many people they're about to have. So we'll see if they're going to be thinking about Smash in terms of their priority list when making those concessions.
So I'm abusing poor Blur here with all these topics, but there's one other topic I must speak to Blur about because, again, it is so unique to Melee, and Blur has the inside lane on it, which is, we talked a little bit earlier about the meta of Melee and how Melee's meta is especially unique because other fighting games, yes, sometimes they gotta ban Akuma because in ST he can infinite you in the corner with fireballs, but for the most part, most other competitive fighting games have a meta that is on the disc or on the cartridge or whatever in the arcade board that you mostly just follow along with. Melee, on the other hand, has its own unique community-made meta that is outside of the constraints of what that game is quite prepared to give to the player. One thing about Melee that I feel like as of late, and this is a criticism, is I feel like because of this nature of Melee having to be dictated by the community, I feel like Melee, over the past few years especially, has gotten a little too comfortable and a little bit too, like, power hungry with how they change rules, how they change, like, how quickly things can change or on what basis things can change. And this is actually, we talked all about Smash, we talked about how I used to play Smash competitively. This is actually what stopped me from playing Melee competitively, is because I got so upset and sick of rule set changes, uncontroller bans, all these shifting factors. And so I thought an interesting topic would be, where does the sort of authority for these rules come from? Like, how does the community derive authority to make rule set changes and to dictate gameplay? Because I think in most other games and other competitive activities, it all goes back to the game. It all goes back to the game's the Bible. We're the Protestants. We're here to interpret the Bible, but the Bible is law. Melee is like the one game that feels much more comfortable changing the Bible, like with literal mods and all these types of shifts that in my mind would be unthinkable for other games, but Melee goes there. So what are your thoughts just generally, and you know the history of this, like where does the authority of Melee rule sets and those types of things come from, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so it's really hard, right? Because in the past, there was some unified way of doing it, at least to a degree, and it's mostly when we were smaller, right? Since the scene got much bigger, and since a lot of the people who maybe did that work stopped doing it, it has become more disparate, and that has
a funny example of this, Blair, is I did a little homework before today's episode, and I know, like, wasn't it in 2009? What's it called? Like the MBR was established. Isn't that what it's called? So I went ahead and looked on Backroom. Yeah, Melee Backroom. So I went ahead and looked through that post of the people who established the rule set in 2009 on Smashboards. I recognized none of those people, except Nintendo. That was the one guy I was like, oh yeah, I recognize him. All these other people, I'm like, they must have disappeared at some point because I don't recognize any of these people.
Well, if it makes you feel better, the guy who basically made that entire rule set, there's other names on there, but Cactuar basically made that whole thing. So there's different eras to it. So basically, there was the early era where there was just a lot of argument on Smash boards, but at least we got to a consensus through arguing.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of that, yes.
And that got somewhere. There was a big rift between the regions. There was like items on or items off. I know that sounds crazy that was an argument back then, but it was. We're talking about really early on. And East Coast and West Coast did things differently. Eventually,
so I'm gonna like pause you through parts of the story for like details that I'm just personally curious about. How did items off win? How did items on lose? What was that process like?
So basically, there was a tournament organizer out in the West Coast who lost a tournament set due to an item, and he was like, "No, actually, this sucks," and that's all it took. It was literally like, basically like at that point, there were so few organizers in the whole scene that what those 2-3 guys said is what we all did, right? Because there just wasn't that many tournaments. This was really early on, and that's how that decision was made, and it was really easy and simple at the time. Of course, everyone argued about it, but under the day, the guy running the tournament,
who runs the tournament makes the rules. That's a golden rule of fighting games. Look at Evo. He who runs the tournament makes the rules.
Right, exactly. And so that went forward, and then slowly you saw tournament organizers change up their list. One seminal one was when Plank, the host of Pound, this was like the biggest tournament series at the time. It was like the biggest event in the scene. I want to say it's 2009. This is off the top of my this is off the top of my head, but I think in 2009 is when he came out with a stage list that was much more restrictive. So basically, we had much more stages legal, and then he came out with one that was much more restrictive. Yeah, exactly. So I see they still had that, but they had a few. No More Mute City, like things like that started getting going away. And that was happening gradually anyways. And then there was also seminal sets, things that happened. So a very famous one is Dr. PP, now people know about PPMD, beat Mutaking on Rainbow Cruise in grand finals of Revival of Melee, which was like a tournament at the time, right? That match was so obscene, the way he won, that they banned Rainbow Cruise.
So
right? Because everyone
I'm going to
argued
pause your
about it.
story here because I need clarifying details on certain things because I think they'll illuminate things later on. Who was the person? Okay, PP owns his opponent on Rainbow Cruise. People watching are like, dude, this stage is busted. But who is the person who said, ban this stage? Was it the guy who lost, who then went to Smashboards and said, this is bullshit, ban this stage? Or was it like the Illuminati, the Smash Illuminati, collectively, you're all watching it and you're like, let's ban this stage. Who banned it?
At that point, it was someone would make a Smashboards thread, literally anyone, right? Maybe the person who lost, maybe not, and they'd be like, should it be legal? And then everyone would start talking in that thread, and then there'd be a backroom thread, basically that mirrors it. That's like, should we actually do this? You know, based on what everyone's saying, right? And it was like, hey, should we actually do this? And again, this was so few tournament organizers that they like the power was concentrated in the hands of a few, right? So things were easy to get done.
In that case, it was the Melee backroom who came together rather than the player. What I'm trying to get at is, did the player himself who lost change that
Have
rule?
that much influence?
Yes.
To a degree, yes, because they were the ones complaining, and often they were in the back room. So it's not like exactly. So it was a little bit of inside baseball early on, and from then there was.
I'm just so curious. What was the argument itself in terms of? Did anyone make the case on the pro keep it around, don't ban it? That
so many people.
But did anyone make the case, the argument that we are overextending our authority and that this is a reactive ban based off of the complaints of the player?
These threads were huge. You can look at them. They're still there. I mean, you could go on Smashboards and look at them. These threads are enormous, where people would argue things like, yes, this aspect of the stage is random, and maybe that makes it less competitive, but also Rainbow Cruise is the only viable moving stage, and we want to have moving stages because that's a skill, right? Being able to work your way in a moving stage is a skill that we want to test. Like, there was tons of those arguments. Those were
What
things.
would you say was the primary value set that determined whether a decision was made among the players? What was the primary value that everyone kind of agreed to and then the stage got banned?
So one thing was people wanted to eliminate randomness, and they wanted the better player to win. So that was like one of the main ones. The other one is simply, is it fun? That is part of it, like a genuine part of it. Like, do I like getting bounced on Brinstar's lava for 70 damage? Is that something I think I want to do with my life? So that's a big part of it too.
That's a scary one. I'll just interject, say that's a scary one, because the one guy who hates getting bounced in Brinstar for 70 damage, there could be another guy who loves bouncing people into the flames for 70 damage, and he's like, this is the sickest thing ever.
Right, and I mean, there's certain moments in Melee's history that could only happen with those stages, right? Like Mango had to rest on Corneria
with the R-wing, right? You need an R-wing to rest on top of it.
Yes, it's the plane was moving. The R-wing was moving, and he rested someone on that. That's crazy. By the way, there are skills that are no longer being tested because those stages aren't, like, it is true that having a moving stage, there are some skills that
changes the meta, absolutely, in the moveset, and what probably changes the character meta as well. Like some characters that blow balls on Final Destination are like sick on Rainbow Cruise. I could see that.
Right, and it's funny because as an old school player, there are people who are way better than me who I destroy on these banned stages because they don't know what to do. They don't even understand these things that I'm doing. I'm like, yeah, I just know that because I played 15 years ago, you know, and then when it was legal. and they just don't know. So that's always funny. So for sure, there's some skill lost, but there is like less randomness and more better player
and you
wins,
gain.
and
I'm not saying you don't gain things. I'm just trying to get inside the mind of the melee backroom. What they value.
Right. So that happens, and then there comes a point where Cactuar basically posts a rule set. I'm telling you, he basically does it on his own, and that is a rule set which.
This might be my favorite example because I kind of respect that a lot more than the reactive stuff. Like the dude who sits down and like envisions a rule set and envisions how it would work, how the meta would work, and try to create like a universal plan. I just personally respect that a lot more than, okay, this happened, the player's complaining, let's ban it. This happened, the player's complaining, let's ban it. I think it's better to have that sort of plan.
Yeah, so anyway, he posted it, and it's a recommended rule set. That's how most of these rule sets work, right? So if any TO wants it, they can use it. And then he is a very well-respected member of the community. He's a top player. And basically, TOs were just, sure, I'm going to copy and paste it in my tournament because people like Cactuar, and so why not, right? And it starts getting used, and especially because it was listed as the official recommended rule set, and of course he had other people look over it, it started getting used heavily. That rule set isn't that dissimilar to what we see now. It is very dissimilar, but it was so short. It's literally like a list of stages and like some very short and sweet. Basically, what you know as the core of the rule set.
Yeah, and I know the rule set really
That's
well,
what-
so you can tell me which rule sets have shifted since then, because I know the rule set super well, having played competitively and stuff.
So fast forward a little bit, and there became a point where we're like, okay, we need something that's like more like what you see in the NBA rules, or like ATP Pro Tour, or like basically like a real like, hey, legalese. Like we need like a real rule set that covers far more. That needs to be long. That's where I'm more involved. I'm involved in this whole thing because I've just been around forever. Just in these discussions. But me and my Nintendo and a handful of others form what's called the Five. And the Five get created, which is like the 5 biggest tournament organizers in the scene. And the idea of it was to make a voting system where we vote on rules and make.
So you guys are like senators for your regions, basically.
Sure. We made something also called a 25, which was a bad idea that we didn't end up using. But it's also something people remember. It was too many people. It was basically our way of saying, okay, the 5 are the TOs, and the 25 we made players, and we gave them voting rights too. What ended up happening is we kind of like had that as part of the system, and then we started to not use it.
My
It's
thought has
like-
always been players are like the worst people to ever ask for rule sets or for any sort of.
Yeah.
And
Right.
like the more high level you get, the more esoteric and niche your opinions become, and then it affects the player base in insane ways, which we'll talk about later. But go ahead.
So this, what comes out of all this process is, and Nintendo does a vast majority of the writing. I do a lot of it. Pretty much me and him are doing everything for it, and then the rest of the guys are voting on everything we propose. And what comes out is like a 40-page document that's like the backbone of what you see now. Everything you see like today is copy and pasted from that, which is a long time ago, but basically they're not that different. You see like a paragraph or two added. So when Smash World Tour came around, Nintendo and also me again, small clauses get added, but the core of it has been there for that. Then a large thing came around, which was the box controllers. That's where a large problem came in, because
For me, that's the divide, I guess, between the Melee I knew and the new Melee. And maybe you love the new Melee. I personally don't. So people need to remember, Blur made this amazing video about this. And I say it's amazing because you're like, oh, this guy's actually thinking through this issue, looking into the future, where everyone else was looking at it like 2 months ahead. Oh, well, it didn't win a major with it, so it's fine. No worries. I definitely, people need to check out that video, Out of Focus, Blur on the Smashbox.
My fears are really not based in its ability to, make people good all of a sudden, but rather that it does these two particular things. It does analog digital conversion and button remaps, right? And I don't think those things should be illegal. And that's my fundamental difference, right? So, what are the consequences of allowing analog to digital conversion? On the Smashbox, it makes your forward into a forward. It makes it has particular buttons that do that can do your angles and of the stick more correctly. If you want to watch exactly what the Smashbox does, you can watch a video. But that's really not the point. The point is that it makes an analog input into a digital input, right? If that is opened up, I actually don't care about the Smashbox. I would make a whole new controller that can do some broken stuff, right? Maybe I'd play Ice Climbers. Ice Climbers, if you guys don't know, and I can link this down there too, have a particular desync they can do on, I think like it's the 181st, where they can do a jump desync. Flymate discovered it like 2014, 2013, something like that, where if you hit that particular indice, the Popo will jump, but Nana won't, right? So you can make Popo jump, but Nana won't. And this is amazing because that means you can make Popo wave dash, and Nana could do something else. You can do a smash attack, something like that, right? You're able to do a desync with no setup. This revolutionized Ice Climbers.
So the problem with that particular issue that happened was the two guys, Nintendo and me, who were making the rules for the most part, as well, there was all the other people voting, but in terms of the other tournament organizers, I felt very strongly about not wanting it to be legal, but the tournament organizers would copy and paste the official rule set and then add in their little rule section plus box is legal, right?
Right. Copyright infringement.
because effectively they wanted the small handful of box players at the time to be able to play because they're like, why not? They don't see the harm in it, and so they're not winning. So what's it matter? And it's like a couple people, and what's the big deal, right? And that's where this you start having a big role.
This is where you've opened Pandora's box, my friends. This is where there's a really good equivalent to this in the FGC, and the FGC kind of went a different route. But there was an equivalent to this with this guy named Fullset, and I think it was Marvel or at the time, where he put in extra buttons that allowed him to do up, back. I think it was up, right, and up, left. He macroed the diagonals to a button, and at the time, like when he started, they're like, all right, fine, do it. And then after, I think he did pretty well, and then they thought about it more. They're like, oh, we can't be having this. And so they actually pulled it back. They pulled that back. But I feel like in Smashes, you didn't pull it back. You continued forward. That's my thought.
Yeah. So, by the way, for clarification, this is a continual. This problem hasn't ended, and I have a big problem with what you're describing too. It's not just you, right? Like, it's me too. I'm still in the scene and stuff, but and every top player dislikes what's currently happening with this too. But so we were put in a very tough spot where we kind of had to make a rule set which we didn't like, right? We were like, we want this banned, but like people aren't doing it. So you'll see a new revision come out, and this is still something I'm working on.
I want to pause your story here because this is some key information that I'm curious about. So you and Nintendo, you both agree, okay, this is not a good direction to go in. But who had the authority in your mind to push onward anyway? Was it that the TOs all went rogue and they all just did what they wanted and then you had to pick up the pieces? Or was there other TOs who said, we're allowing it, and then once it went through, then it's like, well, it's done now. It has been completed. Like, how did it go past you guys thinking, oh no, we don't like this, to it is now just you can't get rid of it?
Well, I mean, if you just look at, like, for example, my video, its dislike ratio is very high because at the time,
yeah, this is what I'm warning you about, Blur, about how you can't always depend on the masses for this kind of stuff, because the people. So you can't always just go by whatever the masses say because they don't have the perspective. At least in my opinion, I've said this a long time.
I mean, retrospective articles and people look at that video very fond. Like people, like we're doing in this conversation, are like, oh, he was
liking it though. I was on your side right at that time.
Sure,
like, this guy's based. That's why you're based, Blur. I'm like,
now there's tons of articles like, oh, he was right all along, and everyone kind of now everyone is kind of on board, but it took them a long time, right? Because they didn't understand. And to be fair to them, like, I was in the sauce of the rules and like understanding corporate organizing.
But you were the only one talking sense. I remember this whole conversation very clearly because everyone else, no one cared really. Everyone's like, whatever. As long as it doesn't beat Mango and beat the gods, who cares? Like, they know the problem about it is everyone just thinks of the rules as affecting the top players. But they always forget about the dudes who show up to the locals who now have to abide by the top player's rule set changes, where I have to show up to my local now and deal with the ramifications of what the larger community says. And if I can't do anything about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're blinked on by a box fox who's brain dead just like anyone else.
Well, I will get to what it wasn't boxes, because you were the box. Yeah. You were thinking ahead. You both me and you know the issue was not the box itself. It was the Pandora's box. The box
Pandora
opened.
that left. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, so then basically we're like, okay, well, the tournament organizers, because of the way public opinion is, they want to see these box players be able to play, and they're like, people don't see it's a big deal. They're adding it anyway into their rules. We come out with amendments which are basically like guardrails, right? So basically like a compromise of saying like, okay, I guess it can be legal, but here are like coordinates they can't pinpoint, and here are like some things that we're adding in that like at least make them a little bit better, but we're still not feeling good about it. We're not like happy to put this out there.
To clarify for the general audience out there, because I think one reason why the Smash Box, slid right under the radar is because people think Smash Box, Hitbox, equivalent. And in my opinion, and you pointed out in the video, the Smash Box is way more radical than the Hitbox. The Hitbox is a keyboard on your lap, where it has some issues, but the Smash Box, what that thing was up to with analog remapping and stuff, it was taking it to the next level.
It's pretty crazy. So anyway, that gets put out, and that becomes what most people use because they want boxes legal anyways, but now there's at least some level of guardrails. It's still not great because really the core issues aren't solved. That basically stays at the status quo for a long time. More recently, like let's say 2.5 years ago, it picks up on Twitter again. Everyone's really mad about the current situation, and so me and Nintendo make a little group, and we're like, hey, do we do something about this? We work on it a little bit. I think Smash World Tour gets a few amendments added, but truth be told, like for me, for example, I was basically in that Discord saying like, yo, I just want to ban this. Like, I don't even want to do any more compromises. I'm kind of over it because I think we have to rip the Band-Aid off. And like other people were like, hey, but then we'll lose all the people who've already switched over to the new controller.
Yep. And that's the way. Once you open that door, it is so hard to reel it back.
So,
and there's also a subplot to this story too. This is what pissed me off, is not the box itself, because like you said, the actual average player running into a box fox doing a crazy shines on you and stuff is quite rare. But what I had to deal with is the fallout of the box's existence, which ended up being, among other top player whims, UCF. So what UCF does for the audience out there is it makes chain grabbing easier because you can do what's it called, where you can turn around more reliably. Yeah, that's dash back. That was supposedly the one thing it was up to. But by the way, let's just make shield dropping easy while we're at it. And so, like, the entire meta shifted overnight. I played on Anther's Ladder ranked before UCF, and then UCF was jammed into Anther's Ladder by force. And then I went from I'm a Fox player. I learned how to manually shield drop, and so this was like an asset in my toolkit. So now I play every Falco on Earth, and the guy can barely wave dash, but he's shield dropping like axe, like a pro, because you just press like diagonal shield drops. It completely, in my opinion, just ruined the mechanical depth of that skill, because it's like, yeah, now it's just free for all the players to use. And supposedly I have a big gripe with UCF. The whole idea of UCF, the whole point of UCF, the whole justification was, okay, but now no one needs modded controllers. That's what we're getting here. You don't need to buy special modded controllers, which I've run into people using those too. You don't have to spend $5,000 on modded controllers and buy 6,000 GameCube controllers. We all can now just play UCF. But did that happen? No. I show up to tournaments, people have more modded controllers than ever, and then it's on top of UCF. So it's like in my opinion, it's like playing a different game. We've got a soft mod and then hardware mods on top of the soft mod. And for me, that was like, oh, okay, this
right here is a $700 controller. This costs $700. Just FYI.
Yeah. For the top players, they all do this. That's part of the top level meta. But the mid-level meta, I feel like UCF, it like really shifted the mid-level meta. Just no one cares. That annoyed me, especially because it didn't get rid of modded controllers. If it had, legitimately got rid of modded controllers, I would have accepted it. But it didn't. They're more modded than ever, in fact. So anyway.
They are more mod. I see it. They are more mod than ever. I think the software changes to the game, by the way, those are done very differently than the ones I mentioned before. I want to get back to before I go to the UCF stuff, because that is very different. The actual update on where it's all at is I kind of didn't want to be a part of it anymore, because I'm just like, hey, I don't want to compromise anymore. And then a new Splinter contingent is now making rules up. They've been working on it for like over 2 years, and they haven't really made any progress. And all the TOs are in different camps and not really paying attention to it. So truth be told, there hasn't been a ton of progress on bringing that all together into fairness. And I really don't know if there will be until, like, for example, a box player.
Until Mango says enough, basically.
Is it worth? Johnny, if you want to try mine, I'll let you try it. Johnny, just imagine nothing messes up. Nothing's easier to do, but everything that your brain wants to do just happens. And it's insane. It's worth. I give it the vouch. It's if you're a fucking pro player, you gotta use this shit. If you're not, you're just, I don't know what the fuck's wrong with you. But every space is gonna have cracked angles. I'll cop them. Why is it 350? Apparently it's easy to fix too.
Someone with a big fat voice. It has to be someone E-famous, basically. In my opinion.
Right.
That's what it feels to me. Like someone E-famous, like Mango or someone, needs to say, enough.
Well,
this is it.
Well, how did Wobbling get banned, right?
Exactly. I want to talk about that too.
1 tweet.
Yes.
Right. So
but can we
basically,
talk before wobbling? Can we talk about the Goomwave? Because you can imagine by my demeanor, I'm not thrilled by this development, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. A sequel to Out of Focus.
I have very complicated thoughts. The thing is, a lot of these rule set stuff have very complicated, nuanced thoughts, right? So I basically don't like certain aspects of what is happening. Doesn't mean I dislike every aspect, right? So the thing I don't like is dynamic and static analog remapping. They're complicated terms. I want to define them. So what that means is, as a dynamic analog remap is when your controller reads some velocity that you have or some previous frame coordinate that you have, and determines your intention, and then remaps your coordinate into another one because of some software. To me, I view that as cheating, and so that's what I don't like. Static analog remapping is when you make the coordinate plane, so like you have this big circle of where all the coordinates are, and you change the ranges so that certain techniques are easier. So let's say you want shield dropping to be even easier, you make the range for that even bigger, right? You want another tech huge.
To explain to people, this all has to be processed by a chip. And this is, for me, this is the huge no-go zone. Because these conversations happen. For example, let's take arcade controllers, because that's a little bit easier. Like, there was a time when Twin Galaxy forced you to use like these broken, crappy Donkey Kong controllers to play Donkey Kong. It's obviously absurd. But the difference is let's say I play on Korean lever, so I put in a Korean lever because I feel like it's better than Japanese lever. Personally, I like that. But the difference is that it is still analog in the physical world. A physical item still needs to physically move and physically hit a switch. So it is subject to the laws of physics and nature. So my opinion, certain controller mods can be allowed if they remain in the physical world. So if you want to notch your controller up, that's in the physical world. If you want to get rid of your gate like Silent Wolf, that's in the physical world. If you want to mod your buttons to be pressier and spongier and shorter, that's all in the physical world. But as soon as you enter in processing electronics, you have now exited what I consider legitimate controller meta, and you have entered the world of macros and assisted controls. That's my opinion.
Right. So anyway, those are the basic, like, if I say like what aspects of those unique motherboards I dislike, it's stuff like that. It's when it basically has an iPhone autocorrect on like your ledge dash. You missed the ledge dash, but it goes, I think actually you hit it, and because I know what you're trying to go for, and so I'm gonna move your coordinate to the right thing, and that to me is like obscene and
well, especially because the risk reward of ledge dash of a mechanic is you hit it or die. That is the risk reward. That's why I took such pride in learning how to ledge dash on a real legit controller, because during that era, it was still a very valuable move, because what do you gain off a ledge dash? You gain recovery frames, but you are risking death. So new players do not ledge dash. That's dangerous. But if you remove that risk or even mitigate that risk, you have now shifted the meta entirely. And maybe at the top end, Mango never misses ledge dashes, so it's like, okay, maybe.
No, it doesn't matter who you are. You're going to miss. These things are hard. Melee is really hard. So no matter who you are, this game is insane, right? So no, for sure. It affects every level, low, high, doesn't matter. It all affects things. And the thing is the reason why these controllers were able to pass through is because people compare it to the box, which is just so insane. I mean, because the truth is that each of these, like the Goomwave, for example, FOBs, they're not even close to the power level. They're not even like in the stratosphere of the box's power level. Because what the box can do is, because it's digital controls, is it teleports you instantaneously to a precise coordinate, right? And that's gonna, like, how can you complain about someone having an extra range on their coordinate plane when this thing can just teleport you to wherever it wants to, and precisely an exact coordinate? Like, you can't, if I wanted to, I can't hit exact coordinates on my game controller in exact pinpoint one every time, no matter how much I try, right? But hitting a button, you obviously can't.
What's sad about this, and why I stopped playing Melee competitively, is because let's say I'm playing you online on Slippy, right? I don't know if you have a Goomwave. I don't know what you're doing, and it just feels like I am now playing at a distinct disadvantage to everyone else unless I invest.
You are.
Unless I invest in this equipment myself. But for me, I'm a hardcore asshole, but for me, that's crossing my personal, what I would consider conduct of play. So I'm not going to cheat just because everyone else cheats, and that's why I quit Melee. Because I was like, if everyone's on board to cheat, I'll just play a different game.
Hey man, I hate to say this because I feel like there's gonna be people in the Smash being mad at me, but this is also why I don't enter. So we actually agree. I haven't entered for a while because I have the exact same general stance in that, what am I gonna do? Sit down next to a box player and pretend it's a real set? No, I'm not.
There's all these sort of rationalizations people make, but for me, at the end of the day, you can rationalize it all you want. You are cheating, and that's uncomfortable to say, and so people in Smash won't say it because, you're going against all the community's opinion and you're going to get downvoted 1,000 times. That's what makes you based. You're saying, no, this is wrong. I think this is wrong, and I'm not going to stand for it. And that's why I quit playing Melee too, because this was it. This was the dividing point for me, where I felt like I was getting cheated against, and I didn't want to participate in that.
The problem is, though, first of all, this is not like, I'm not like this incredible, at this point, it used to be where I was like this guy who was just like, I had an opinion that was unpopular because people were like, what's the big deal? If you pull the entire top 30, I'm fairly sure 30 out of 30, or at least 29 out of 30, I think maybe only SFAT is a guy who's like, oh, it's fine. The rest of them are extremely angry about this. They just don't post about it.
Right, because they have to face the wrath of the mob.
Because there's a large contingent of players who are using those controllers, and the problem is that because imagine telling someone, hey, this insanely hard game where it's insanely difficult to control your character, don't use tools and don't use equipment which make the game far more fun to you, frankly. Like, it's more fun hitting your ledge dashes instead of SDing. Like, it's clearly more fun. Like, I would enjoy that experience more, like, clearly, than the
I guess the dividing point, and this, you are correct. For like 90% of people, that is absolutely the case. But it reminds me of the people who play Tekken online, and I know you have an electric macro. I know, because you never, not once, you haven't missed. What about the lag spike? You didn't miss your electric during the lag spike? Yeah. But there are certain people who that is amazing. They love it. It's so great. But for me, I personally would feel disgusted with myself if I'm beating, even in casuals online, beating people with a macro electric. I would feel disgusted. But if everyone all sort of just jumps on board and says, oh, it's fine, then yeah, that's the new paradigm. That's the new world we live in, and the old cranky bastards have to just deal with it or quit. It's what it feels like.
Right. Which is why, I commentate still. I still love the game. I'm still involved. But it's hard for me to want to. I mean, I would rather currently play Street Fighter competitively for this reason. Like, I would just rather do. Even though I like Melee like 10 times more, like a lot more. Like, I think I
Melee was my favorite fighting game, bar none, for my entire existence playing it.
Right. So this is a problem. Hopefully, I don't know how it will get fixed. I think if someone wins a major that way, maybe we'll see a shift. But it's definitely become a really strong contention point. In the scene, and it's one of those things that I view as like an existential threat for the entire scene, because there are people like you who like, and there's people like me, and there are people like that who like, they'll end up being voiceless because they're just going to leave, and the people left are the ones who are going to be making decisions, and then they'll continue to do that, and they'll accelerate, right? So I think it's really tough. I don't have great answers because it annoys me too. Like, that's pretty much speaking to someone who agrees with you. But I mean, there is also progress. Like, I think not everything that's been added and innovated on is bad necessarily, right? Like, we've learned a lot more about controllers in the process. We've learned a lot more about the game mechanics in the process.
Yeah.
And,
So like my solution to this would be, like, I'm sure the GameCube controller in itself is not the bastion of mechanical design of controls of Melee. And I'm not someone who is closed-minded to the idea of improving that, but I'm saying the method for me of improving that would have to be legitimate mechanical improvements, not chips and processing and macros. You'd have to build something that's mechanically superior.
And in general, like, I think because, like, you look at certain mechanics, like dash back out of crouch, dash back, those things, like, that UCF was meant to address, for you know, you could say about modded controllers or whatever that has to deal with. I think in general, I far prefer software modifications, literally changing the game, to these controller solutions that are, like, where one player has the crazy controller, another person has the $50
well,
Fisher
the
Price
reason why
controller.
I don't is
And
because you
yeah.
don't solve that problem. You actually just double it. So I'm a big critic of UCF for this reason. One, I feel like the meta of dashback, I don't know if I fully agree that, oh, you can never drop a chain grab. Maybe part of the design of the game is sometimes you're going to randomly drop a chain grab because the game, through the mechanical nature of it, does not allow that.
It does change the balance. So, for example, I mean, I think if you ask most top players, like, wow.
Yeah.
Falco
you get grabbed
might have been
on
the best
you get grabbed on a Final Destination. Goodbye, buddy. Yeah.
Well, it's not just that, but like, let's think about, like, say, the character Falco, right? Falco, before UCF, when he lasers you hitting a dashback or not was, like, very difficult to do, and also a little bit RNG because the way the polling works, right? But now everyone can just get a dashback after every laser, which makes Falco like a way worse character, much worse. So it naturally affects game balance. Ice Climbers, because there was some aspect of, you know, people missing things because of the way the game mechanics worked, they would get like wobbles at the time because it was legal, because people would miss stuff like that, and it would make their character better. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people would say, yeah, but that was super unfun. I want to be able to hit a dashback, and I don't want to get pulled in the wrong way. And also, by the way, boxers are legal, and boxers can teleport to dashback every time they want, and no matter what version you're playing, so we have to have it legal, which is.
But for me, though, like I said before, I view the game as the Bible. And, you know, some people say you can write in what you want into the Bible, and some people say you can't. For me, a software mod, you are now the maker of the game. Whoever made UCF is now the maker of Melee. Whoever made that modification has more authority than the team that made Super Smash Bros. Melee, because that modder is saying, this is a flaw in the design. I know better than the game. I know better than the makers of Melee. Dashback should not work that way. My vision is this. And so, like I said, I was forced into this vision of Melee, which I didn't agree with. I was like, no, I think dashback should be missable. I think this should be part of the game's just meta in itself. And then, of course, the shield dropping for me was like, okay, now you're going way too far there. But then, like I said, it actually did not solve the problem, though, because if it was truly, okay, now no one mod their controllers now that we have dashbacks free, but that's not what happened. Instead, it still continued that you didn't avoid the hardware modification problem. You've just doubled it now. You've got software mod and hardware mod.
Right, I see what you're saying here. So here's the thing. I think that, like, basically there's, for me, like, making a rule set which I'm happy with isn't really that complicated in Melee. Like, take dynamic analog remapping out. I would take static analog remapping out, and I would ban boxes wholesale, right? Like, and that solves a hardware problem. A lot of the other stuff they're doing, completely fine. They are doing other stuff that I'm like, it's fine. You can have profiles in your controller. I don't care. You can calibrate this or that. Like, it's not that big a deal. Fine, right? Because they're not massive advantages like autocorrect on your freaking controller, right? Or in the box's case, just absurdity.
And also with those Goomwaves, you got to know someone to get one. You know, I can't walk into Best Buy and walk out with a Goomwave.
Sure. You can order it online, but you know, these people have. Oh, it'll cost you. Probably like 250 to 300, 200 to 300 is controllers minimum, yeah. But anyway, so there's that, and you never know, by the way, when a new hot one would come out with like some new cheat codes that you'll then want to upgrade
Yes,
to.
yeah.
Yeah.
The meta of the controller modifications has its own meta, which is.
So I think like there's a way of making it so that the super egregious stuff is gone, in my opinion. And then some of the quality of life stuff stays. And as far as the software stuff, you're right that we can't get to the point of purity. I don't mind it as much as you do, because I think some of those mechanics were genuinely flawed. Some of them definitely did go too far. But I will say, at least it'll be fair, right? Yes, it won't be Melee as HAL Laboratory intended. It will be some different thing. But that some different thing is still really cool. Right, and it's still the greatest game of all time, and I'm willing to compete in that. Whereas I'm not willing to compete in an ecosystem where, you know, one guy has an insane controller advantage to someone else, and that's like, to me, as long as there's like an even player field, I don't mind it as much, and that's what software mods at least allow, whereas hardware doesn't, and right? that's where I find a distinction.
My point is that's
a you.
If UCF goes long enough people agree with it, enough people habitualize to it, it gets baked into everything, it's everywhere at all times, it becomes ubiquitous. So that is closed. But now we're on the next part. The controllers, the hardware mods, the Goomwaves. And what I'm saying is, let's say you let this fester, and you let this go on and on. At what point does that paradigm close? And now just accept Goomwave, bro. That's the future.
So there's a contingent of people who say you can't ban boxes, for example. I think if you ban boxes, those other things being pulled back is very possible, because a lot of people justify the GameCube controllers because they're like, hey, it needs to at least be able to compete a little bit. Because the thing is, the Goomwaves and all those are so much weaker than the box that people are like more accepting of it. But if it was just normal GameCube controllers, I don't think those things would have ever happened, right? And so I think if the box gets banned, it's possible for those things to get reeled back. But for the box to get banned, it's very likely that you need someone to actually win a tournament. and then you might see the people's true emotions like really come out. Because a lot of people hold these feelings.
You guys that's why I really respected the part of the story with Cactuar, where he just wrote the rule set and like thought it through and had his like vision of it. Whereas now I feel like you guys are kind of stuck in this position where in order for rule sets to change, some shit needs to go down and there needs to be like big public outcry. And I just feel like I think that's a less healthy style of rule set and rule formation than the planned out, legalistic, we all get on Smash boards and we yell at each other and amendments of your amendments and like the Illuminati battle-y out, but then come to a conclusion. That feels to me more of a comprehensive, coherent way to make rules. Whereas now it feels like, okay, Hungrybox is ledge camping. We're sick of it. Ledge count limit. Or people are getting wobbled and complaining. Get out of here wobbling. You know, it feels a lot more. Over the years, I remember the years of do we wobble, do we not wobble? And I always thought there'd be sort of like this debate and then it would be resolved and then we'd come to something. But it's just one day I was like, oh, wobbling's banned? It just happened all of a sudden. So, I love I hope I'm not taking up too much time, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the wobbling and the ledge grabs. And then I'll leave you alone.
I mean, the thing is, the ledge grab one's very funny because the number it was set at was so high. So we had a vote for ledge grab limit. And it was just like, yo, the number's so high, we know it'll never be relevant. And it's so far, there hasn't been a single match to my knowledge for it to actually have been applied. So part of it was like put as a rule because we wanted to find the stalling rule a little bit further. And so that one, to me, I think it's like, yes, people complained and it was an antithesis, but it was put at a number that's high for a reason, and it hasn't actually made any difference in the metagame or It's pretty relevant. Wobbling it was very relevant and was a social movement.
Going back to the ledge grabber, the one that rubs me the wrong way about it is definitely because to me it felt very specifically because of Hungrybox and his planking on the ledge. And what's funny is, again, going back to the ATP episode I'm referring to, when Hungrybox did that in EVO 2015, they were saying that it was funny because the Smash guys were like, this is unbelievable, this is dishonorable, he's dishonoring the game. And the FGC guys were like, Hungrybox is sick. He is playing to win. He is conducting the art of war, and these melee scrubs need to understand the art of war.
And the other one was that one dude, Hungrybox. I think he got second, right? Mm-hmm. And it was almost like people were getting super butthurt about how he was playing.
Really?
Because he's doing some cheap shit, right? I guess, what is it, like just staying on the ledge of the stage or whatever, and just
Because he can
chilling.
just like fly around so many times with his jumps.
Yeah, so it's almost like he doesn't have to fight, you know, he just chills there. And so people were getting butthurt. Even Mango tweeted like, dude, you're gonna do this in top 8? Like,
Why not?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Why would you not?
So that was like, there's half of the crowd going, this guy's fucking whack, boo, he's not, you know, whatever, like, he sucks. And then there's other players, the ones that don't play Melee, are like, dude, that's so sick, look at that guy, he's winning. And that was the divide, and I thought that was pretty interesting just to see.
That totally reminds me of Evolution 2013, Cambo versus Jackie Tran. How, like, he was just running.
2013?
Sorry, 2003. 2003. Tekken Tag 1. That shit was crazy. Internet, Google that shit. Go to YouTube and look it up. And this guy is running for his life. And the crowd is cheering for him to run for his life. But all the Tekken players in the crowd are like, boo! Fight like a man! You know? It was so sick. It's totally worth your time, even if you're not a huge Tekken fan. It's super old school. 2003 Evolution.
Look at the Okazemi. Goes for another ground throw that could have worked. He's got a nice lead now. 29 seconds left. And he's going to run for it. Razor Rush. Doesn't block the mid. He's backing up. Look at Jackie Tran trying to figure out how am I going to approach this shithead. Look at this. I'm out of here. 18 seconds left. Clock's winding down. Razor Rush for to represent the counter hit. Backing up. 13 seconds left. Down 1 while standing 4. Really sick. Jumps in the air to reduce damage. 9 seconds left. Jackie Tran. Oh my god, so sick. And then look at this. He's almost going to lose. In comes True Ogre. Down 1. Sweep. This combo will kill. But time runs out before he has the opportunity to do the last hit of the game-winning combo. Holy shit. I love that match. That match is amazing.
Sick.
That's the game, man.
Welcome
That's
to
the
the
game you guys are
streets,
playing.
exactly.
Yeah.
Dude, that was like the Lena healing too, man.
Oh, I know. That was crazy too.
You ain't got time to no. When you're on top 8 at Evo,
Yeah.
you better hold on to that ledge and just chill there.
The way I see it is, if your opponent is getting annoyed, then you're winning, right? So why the do you want him to feel comfortable? Let me make sure you take your shoes off, bud. Feed him grapes and shit. What do you think this is? So yeah, definitely. Okay, so that's Melee.
So for me, it's like I've always felt like Melee has its vision of what the game should be, and then it will mold the game to that vision, and alternative visions are now to be cast out. So there could be people like the FGC guys who thought Hungrybox stalling people and planking them on the ledge was quite hype and quite funny and quite interesting. But, you know, that goes against the spacey, and I'm a Fox player, the spacey heavy meta of that. And so,
yeah,
to me, it felt very Hungrybox stop. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, there is an aspect to it. It's like, hey, you're molding a rule set to be the game you want it to be. There's really no stopping that because, like, end of the day, you do have to have a stalling rule, right? You need to have it, like...
Well, in Smash, because Smash is a community-made meta. So, yeah.
Sure. If two people stand on opposite sides of the screen and they don't fight each other, and they just sit there, and you have a best of 5 that goes to the 8-minute timer every single game... Then you have a 40-minute set, and you're holding up the whole tournament.
But here's an interesting counterexample. I guess I'm Hungrybox's lawyer many years later. You can make the so again, we're so focused on Jigglypuff, but you can actually make this argument on many mechanics of Melee that are accepted. Like, why isn't there a laser gun limit on Fox? Like, let's say, like, remember Armada would run and just gun gun poor hungry box over and over and over.
Yeah.
There was never a moment where the Melee scene said, you know, this is kind of unfair to hungry box because Puff is not made to catch a quick fox with a gun. And this gun mechanic of Fox is quite unique, so maybe we should ban Fox lasering. Never happened. Not even entered the conversation, but a lot of these arguments you make against Puff planking, you could make on all these other Melee mechanics because the game's absolutely wild. So you could say, okay, no planking, but no lasering, Fox. You have to fight Jigglypuff with no lasers.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. First of all, Fox destroys Jigglypuff, like in general, in terms of as a matchup. Like, so it's funny how it went against the character that loses the matchup, in some ways. I think there is a degree of bias for sure. Like, I don't think a lot of people vote for or promote rule sets that would make them worse, right? And you saw, especially with the wobbling one, where when it was ruled that wobbling was banned, a ton of Ice Climber players quit.
I haven't seen an Ice Climber since. Where are they? Where'd they go?
Well, actually, one came around and he became really, really good, which is very funny because all of us were like, oh, I guess you can't just do it anymore because the character needed it. But then there's a guy who came around and his name was Slug, and you should watch his VODs if you haven't from last year. Very good. Very, very good. Like, can win majors level good. So
yeah, but the thing about the wobbling ban, again, it's like I guess I'll be the Wobbler's lawyer too. I personally was not hugely a fan of wobbling, but I had more of a I have more of respect for the burden of proof is not on the wobble. The burden of proof is on me getting rid of the wobble. I need
because it's changing the game.
Yes, I need a ironclad argument to make this rule set change against the nature of the game. And I felt like the wobble, again, yes, it's a nasty, sharp edge in the mechanics of Melee. It's like this spear that comes through and nails you. But at the same time, if you look out, was wobbling really overtaking the meta of the game? Were wobblers winning majors? Were wobblers?
Of course not.
Yeah. Was it that degenerate? Actually. Was it that broken? Or was it that they don't want to learn to mash out of getting, or like wiggle out of getting grabbed? They don't want to worry about separating Nana and all that meta. Because people act like you just get grabbed and instantly wobbled. Like, they have to set the wobble up. Nana's got to be nearby. You have to get grabbed, too, because you can mash out of grabs and stuff. Like, I played against tons of wobblers, and I eventually figured out the meta of it. But, yeah, so in my opinion, I don't think the evidence is there. I feel like, yeah, sure, it's a sharp edge, and sharp edges aren't fun for some players, but that's the nature of the game. But, yeah, so how did it end up getting banned? What was the rationale there?
Well, basically, it was one tweet that basically started it all. Axe basically was like, hey, we should ban this. And a lot of people agreed because they were tired of getting wobbled, and it was unfun. The truth of the matter is that that's how I viewed the history on it, is that, like, look, 98% or some number, 99% of the player base don't play Ice Climbers. They're the people getting wobbled. And it's not fun to get wobbled, and it's pretty uninteractive and uninteresting.
But it's unfun to get up-throw and rest by Jigglypuff. That's not fun. If you're a Fox player and you're day one, Jigglypuff grabs you, up-throws, rests you, that's not fun. So is Jigglypuff next? That's my question. they got wobbles. Sure. Puff is next.
Sure. So that's effectively how it happened. I was always in the wobbling shouldn't be banned camped, mostly because I think Ice Climbers, while they don't need it in a lot of their matchups, it would be nice to have for sure in every matchup, but in like certain ones like Peach and Puff, it's like necessary. Like I think Icy's beating Peach without wobbling is just like a comical endeavor. It's like very, very difficult. Puff, it's like really, really hard without wobbling, because you need that big punish that wobbling provides. That was always my argument. But I do think that wobbling stands out as a particularly unfun mechanic relative to the rest of the Melee, which has much more counterplay. There's DI, slide off, all these other things that you could do. And so
but but the thing is that there are a lot of things in Melee that are like, if it hits you, you're just dead. But I feel like because wobbling stands out as such a weird one, like it's weird. So, I think that's the main case against it. But there's a lot of shit in Melee, like Puff. If Puff grabs you and up throws you as Fox, if you don't DI that shit, you're dead. Up throw rest, you're dead. And there's all kinds of crazy setups. Marth has all kinds of crazy setups, like box shine spike in your ass. Like, there's all kinds of just really sharp edges of this game that I like, that I love. This is why I loved Melee. I loved how sharp and grimy and nasty it was, that you could start at 0% and die in like 5 seconds if you don't know what you're doing. Wobbling was like a weird form of that. It was like, okay, this is funky as hell, especially on such a lame, low-tier character.
So the argument,
but to me, it didn't
would
defy the nature of Melee for me. It was just like a real sharp aspect.
The argument that people will make, and again, like I said, this is not necessarily a position I hold, but the argument that people will make is that, yeah, you could say that about Brinstar being legal, or Mute City being legal, or almost anything that we've done. A lot of the things that were done were to shape the game around a vision that the community seems to hold at some level of consensus, right? And if a majority of people dislike getting wobbled, that's not that different from a majority of people dislike playing on greens, right? And that's basically the argument that they would make.
But where's the limiting principle? Yeah. That's what I'm trying to find. Because because Melee is a community-made meta, this must occur in various forms, otherwise it wouldn't exist as a meta. But what I'm curious about is, in your opinion, what do you think is like the limiting principle of these things? Like, let's say, I said it as a joke, but let's say realistically, enough people get sick of Jigglypuff in the next 10 years that there becomes a legitimate movement to ban Puff, because they say Puff is counter to the meta. Puff slows down matches. Puff isn't the spirit of Melee. Puff isn't this. Puff isn't that. Hungrybox retired too. Let's say Hungrybox retires, so we don't even have to worry about him. He's gone. So now it's just, shall we ban Puff now? Shall we? Like, what would be the limiting principle to say, no, you can't ban Puff? Or does that principle exist?
I think the way it has been, there hasn't been a limiting principle. And I also would contend that there isn't really a concise one that you could make, considering the tools Melee itself gives you. If the core of it is, hey, we need to just go by the consensus of a community, that has been what basically it has been throughout 22 years.
That's what it sounds like, yeah. I'm glad. That's why the history is really important, so we understand kind of how things happen.
Because even when there has been unifiers, like me, Nintendo, and so on, even when we write down something we don't want, if the Chios go ahead and do it another way, like it's not really, what are we gonna do? You know, we're just some Joe Schmoes, right? Like, they're running the tournaments, right?
You have no Harada. You have no Harada that comes in and says, no,
we're not the developer.
This is how it happens, and I am Harada.
Yes, exactly. And so, to a degree, like, there can't really be an incredibly principled stance. It has to be communal consensus. That's the best we can do. Right? It's like trying to find in politics there to be some sort of through line in terms of, like, this is the logical endpoint of how you make every decision, ethical endpoint, right?
I would hope I'd hope you'd have something like that. Rather than pure mob rule. Yeah.
Right, like there are like ethical principles, like ethical framework that people try to make, like utilitarianism or whatever, where they try to justify everything they do. But each of those have their own pitfalls, and each of those have their own contentions, right? And that's why people settle on democracy or some consensus systems in order to make decisions. And I don't think it's that different here.
Yes, I agree, actually. And I understand the process, but I don't discuss politics, but this is like a structural thing that's not specific to any politics. But so politically, let's say we want the people to make the rules. There is a structure of voting and senators and court cases and federal judges and all this stuff. But Melee seems to lack even let's say, like you said, for example,
nothing even close.
Yes, like for example, you're saying a lot of the top players, when you hit them in the DMs, they will say, Goomwave, these boxes, we're not a fan of this. But they have no way to voice this outside of just pure public broadcasting. That's the problem, is because your game is community made, like the community management of it is now a bitch, because to do it properly, in my opinion, you'd probably have to build some sort of voting system and Senate system or something, so that they come together and rule, okay, the people of California have come to the decision that wobbling is now banned, case closed, rather than what Twitter and Reddit say, and whoever has the most followers on Twitter, Reddit.
That's what the 5 was aiming to be. It was trying to be like, hey, all the major TOs come together and they get a vote, and that's part of why like the Senate system, like the 25, it was like, hey, let's give the players a vote. There was a theory that this same idea was what was explored, and that's where the most progress was made. Literally, when you talk about the backbone and the actual words that you see pasted as the rule set was made through some level of system behind that, right? But like the thing is that like if people then take what you write through a system like that, and then they just write plus box is legal, then what did I do all that for, right? And I'm as someone who like, dude, as someone who did all that unpaid just because I thought it was a good idea, right? It's kind of like I'm not gonna do all that work if no one's gonna even care, right? And so ultimately, even if you make a grand Senate system, it's still everyone's event is their event.
It's such an unstable existence.
And they're gonna run their events in a way that maximizes, ticket sales and entry fees. And if that means people with cheater controllers won't go to their tournament unless those are allowed, they're probably gonna allow them. And unfortunately, that makes it a really hard balance to come up with something truly fair. And so there are new people around who are trying to make some brand new rule set, and I wish them luck. But unfortunately, I think they're going to run into the same problems I ran into, which is they're going to put out their thing, and they're going to watch as no one does it.
Right, yeah. I tried to make a rule set for shmups. I just gave up on it because, I mean, basic stuff as far as, have video evidence of your world records and stuff like that. And again, you would think that was simple, but it was like entering the world of politics. It was extremely complicated, and I was like, I don't care that much, guys. I only cared enough to bring it up, but I'm not going to dedicate my life to this. But you and a lot of the Melee guys did. You guys actually did dedicate a large portion of your lives to it, and I just think people should appreciate that because, like, all this stuff, it needs something underneath it. It needs some sort of, like, you at least made the document that they can write plus box on top of. Otherwise, it's... What it Canaria's legal one tournament, it's banned the next. Wobbling's on, wobbling's off. Jigglypuff's banned, Jigglypuff's legal. Like,
now at the end of the day, it was still really good work because, like you said, there is still now this backbone that's gonna live forever. Like 20 years from now, people will still use the same words we wrote back then, right? And maybe they'll add like a sentence here or there. Maybe they'll do an amendment that'll somehow pop up through some new group. But the core of it is finally there, and that's nice. So in a way, it's not like I view it as a waste of time. I think it was actually a great thing that was done. It was a good accomplishment. But I think going from here to the more contentious issues, the ones where, the mires that we're in, which are like the ones we've talked about, it's much more difficult to resolve. Or maybe it's not. Maybe someone's just going to win a tournament on box. Maybe all the top players are going to play, and one tweet will come out, and that'll get all solved, and it won't be that bad, right?
I don't know, because... If you're making a product and you're marketing it and that's part of like your thing, like is the Smashbox like still around? Like, do they still market the Smashbox? Yeah, so they're it's a little bit different there because you have this company now that's got, they're like lobbyists. They got their Smashbox lobby, basically.
And I mean, if you pay attention to Street, by the way, this is not like only a unique to Smash problem. Like Capcom recently put out a ruling that would change, like limiting the hitboxes, capabilities. Which you're not gonna like this, but if you want to know what controller I play Street Fighter on, I've joined the dark side.
Well, so my feeling on the hitbox is a bit different than the Smashbox because, so theoretically, your hitbox can be legit. It's just. So you can literally just have a hitbox that's a keyboard in your lap. And for me, I don't care if you have a keyboard in your lap. It's if you can do magical macros on it and stuff.
I've played traditional fighting games on all the control schemes. This thing is just like, I feel like I'm cheating. Is the thing. To the point where I'm like, I'm in a weird spot where I'm like, well, Daigo's playing on it, so I'm not gonna stop. Like it's like, at what point it's like, now it's just the norm. It's not quite to love the Smash point because again, I'm not teleporting to analog coordinates. At least it's
right. It's like humdrum compared to what Smash is up to.
But I will say I have walked forward and then immediately reacted and blocked something, like by pressing back with my other finger, and been like, yo, I couldn't do that before, right? Like, And there's so many shortcuts that make things easier. Like that's crazy. Like I'm doing like crouching instant DPs that like because first of all I also am like measuring it, right? I'm looking at the input reader being like, how fast am I hitting my DP? It's so much faster. I'm hitting it feels like I'm playing modern in terms of how fast I'm doing special motions against everyone else, and I'm literally comparing it against my opponents. I'm like, yeah, all my motions are 10 times faster than everybody. This is sick. I'm winning, you know? So no, don't get it twisted. Huge advantage, and I'm not gonna front. Humongous advantage. There's a reason that the top players are starting to use that.
For me, it bothers me less because
it should.
But you could make the argument that there is a mechanical fundamental improvement there. Like mechanically, it's better. Because the problem with the box and the problem with Goomwaves and stuff is it's not mechanics. It's like these little microchips and shit in there that's making your inputs better and doing things. Whereas like the box, you could at least make the argument that mechanically it is fundamentally better since you don't have to physically move the stick around and stuff. So that one bothers me unless you do the double input thing. That's where I said no, because now you're doing macro type stuff. What I'm getting at is at least at some point physical space still limits the box, where you still physically have to press those buttons and engage them at some point. Whereas with like the Smash box, electronics escape the physical world.
That is definitely true, and I think that of course when you go digital for sure. And trust me, I was a stick player for a long time, so I get it. I mean, I've tried all the other ones. It's very clearly just better, but not by
because
yeah.
Like for Street Fighter, no doubt, I would never argue for Street Fighter.
No doubt.
Hitbox is just top tier for Street Fighter. But I feel like when you get into like 3D games and stuff, and games that don't require, like for example, Virtua Fighter, all your inputs are press button, press direction, and so like it's not really giving you much more of an advantage anymore because motion inputs no longer really are that much of a factor. Now it's about like I would almost feel like sticks better for Virtua Fighter because it's just like the fatigue of like because you're sidestepping, you're like just like you're moving your arm for hours, you know. Whereas in Street Fighter, it's much more like stand, you know what I mean? Like the motion inputs in Street Fighter are more important, but in other fighting games, they're not as important, I don't think.
Also, I think with Street Fighter, activation is like, first of all, I mean, maybe I sound like an execution snob just because of the games I come from. I don't find Street Fighter's execution very difficult. I think it's one of the easiest. It's really easy. It just is, right? And so for me, what matters is actually just activating faster, right? That's much more important to me than like how difficult any motion is because all the motions are easy on every control scheme.
Right, yeah. And that's why I think we see Daigo and the top players finally switching over to Hitbox.
Because they're like, hey, I would rather just be able to block on frame 1 rather than like the 3 frames it takes for me to travel there on a stick, right? And that's like a massive difference. And so for that game, for sure. For other games though, like let's say you play a game where it's much less intuitive to play that.
Yeah, I feel like
no doubt.
I feel like the 3D games especially.
Like, so
I just feel like in those games, even if there is a slight advantage, it starts to decay anyway.
Yeah. And nonetheless, it's like there's basically a gap of like, okay, activation frames is an advantage, it's a big advantage, but like, you know, with Smash, it's like there's also pinpoint accuracy, and so that's like another level. And then with you know, each game, it's like there's different levels of advantage and disadvantage between control schemes, but I think it's like a matter of like by how much and how so, right? Like, I don't know of a game. I don't think it's possible.
I think the closest is probably Shmups because the controls are so simple. There's, you know, it's so one-to-one. Like you press left, you go left. You press up, you go up. You can spin quarter circle and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter. It's all just one-to-one.
Yeah. It feels like stick and pad are literally as equal as I've seen, and keyboards feels worse, if anything. So like, for me, Shmups are probably, you're right, the most equal. But yeah, every game, it's like there's never a perfect evenness among control schemes, and you mostly just need it to be like close enough where no one feels like anyone's cheating, and like that's the key. Please, right? Like that's one of the big things.
But I feel like Melee's in this weird spot right now where it's not, like you're saying, it's kind of in this limbo zone here. Whereas you look at Capcom with Street Fighter 6, they've got Big Daddy Capcom coming in, and if Capcom says no hitbox or whatever their rule is, it shall be so. You know, it's just that simple. Whereas Melee, like you said, it's like this whole community consensus. Can you win?
but
Can
they
your side
still,
get people to agree and not agree?
They still have hesitation around like banning hitboxes, for example, right? Because they still are thinking like, well, they're like, hey, do we want a percentage of our player base to be mad at us, right? They have games to sell, right? And they want attendees to be. So
Plus, there are
so
a lot of keyboard players too. There are so many keyboard players. Like a lot of my friends are keyboard players. So, like the hitbox is their natural peripheral because they play on keyboard. So that's why I'm saying if the hitbox is made properly to act like a keyboard and not, that doesn't do simultaneous directional inputs and stuff, it doesn't really bother me so much. Versus a Smashbox or a Goomwave.
I think it sounds like, based on like if you want to do a running thread of like your opinions, you care a lot about developer intent, right? Like basically, wait. Let me finish my point. Let me figure it out. Let me try to think what I'm trying to say. Maybe I got you wrong, but basically like because Street Fighter ships with keyboard support, gamepad support, and stick support, then like those are what's allowed to you. Whereas like Melee, like game controller is the only thing that can plug into a GameCube last I checked, right? Like normally, and so these people coming out with this insane stuff, which has chips in it, and like they could do legitimate like teleportation, seems outside the realm of things. I think. Am I understanding like is that a part of why you'd be against alternate control schemes, or am I misinterpreting that?
Yeah, so it's kind of complicated, but it's actually not developer intention. It's game design integrity. The key is, so I don't give a shit what the developer has to say. Normally, the difference is modern gaming, developers can literally go in and change it. The developer could literally go in and change your game, which I'm not a huge fan of a lot, but what I care about is respect to the design of the game. And so, like soft modding, like I said, my view of games, we talked about this in the beginning, is that a game is a product of a team of a distinct entity in a distinct period of time. And that game exists. And then once it exists, I feel like the ultimate authority to it is the game itself, versus if you mod Melee and everyone plays Melee, you are the authority now. You are the person who determines the meta. You are now essentially above what the game has to say. And so when it comes to like controller stuff, like I said, if you want to mechanically make your controller do things better, like be able to travel faster or your buttons feel better and all that mechanically in the physical world. But once you start processing inputs and you start soft modding the game and putting your authority over the game, then you've taken on yourself authority, because let's say there's a contingent of players who don't want their game soft modded, like myself. I don't want UCF. I want vanilla Melee, but vanilla Melee is now replaced with a greater power that is UCF and the people who support it.
Right.
So that's where I come from, is that from whom does the authority come from? And the tricky part with modern games now is developers can literally blow up your PlayStation and the next day Devil Jin's sweep no longer tracks a certain way. And I'm not a big fan of that either, but it's still, now it is in the game. The game is still the authority of what's happening, versus when you have to make a meta yourself, you have to kind of start to now shape it in your view. Like you said, you have to shape it, but who gets to decide who's the authority?
Well, in a weird way, like with Melee, it's actually pretty obvious. It's Slippy. So it's like we do have our equivalent to a developer, right? Like we don't have, it's not Nintendo for us. It's not Bandai. It's not Capcom. It's not all these companies. It's Slippy. It
once was Anther, because that's how UCF originally got to me, was I was playing Anther's Ladder, and it
exactly. And now it's Slippy. So in a way, like a lot of those like decisions and calls aren't really that different than the decisions like Capcom has to make when putting out a change to their game or a change to their rule sets. Because
but what I loved about loved about Melee was how it was static. I did really appreciate that, because it drives me nuts. Well, like Tekken 7, I play Devil Jin. Namco can't decide how they feel about Devil Jin. The Hell Sweep tracks this way. The Hell Sweep stops tracking. Last time I checked, one of his up forward 3 no longer knocks down. The electric does different things. Like, yeah, I'm not a fan of this either. That is part of the nature of modern fighting games. But for me, it's a little easier for me to swallow that coming from Harada than it is to swallow coming from some dude in California or New York or Texas or whoever's deciding this. You know, whoever has the most Twitter followers. For me, that's a little easier. At least the creator of the game is somewhat involved in these decisions.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been abandoned by the creator of our game a long time ago, so we have new overlords, which are at least our own. I mean, I will say I do think they make better decisions than Sakurai would make. Sakurai would have had us tripping a long time ago. He would just add tripper to melee, you know. So I mean, there is that. I think overall it speaks to patch culture. Thankfully, because there is some level of conservatism in the sense that people don't want to veer too far away from the melee that they know. Even though it has moved to unstomachable point, at least for me. In fact, I think a lot of it. Oh, the controller stuff is different. I think the software stuff has been extraordinarily slow, relatively, compared to the hardware stuff. And for the most part, like I said, it's way less contentious. Way less contentious. Like, overall, people are happy with UCF. I haven't heard a lot of people mad about it.
Wasn't Nunn not thrilled with it? Because he said it messed up something.
He was. But overall, he kept playing, and overall, it's been a thing where, because it's an even playing field, it hasn't been that bad. The controllers, meanwhile, it's like it's such a headache, because even though I say okay, a lot of it's behind closed doors, it's a new Reddit thread once. Like pretty much every day, right? Like, it comes up again and again, and in discourse over and over and over again. Like, look at this. I'm on the show, and I get asked about it again. I haven't been making rule sets for a long time. You know, I just commentated tournaments. That's all I'm doing. But I get asked about it all the time because people care, and it's a constant issue. I don't get asked about UCF very often.
I'm happy to be the one who complained about it. The last man standing.
The
final man standing for vanilla melee.
Dude, you're talking to a guy who I have a lot of purist approach in terms of how I approach games too, and we have a lot of similarities in terms of how we view video games, right? And what we like in them. In fact, a lot of the games you like are the games I like. That's one thing I noticed. But nonetheless, if I had to rank how offended I am by both issues, it's like the hardware one is over here, and I could wax philosophical whether the UCF stuff was right or wrong, but it's not gonna make me not enter, right? Whereas the hardware one, I'm just like, bro, I'm not gonna play against those people.
Yeah,
and that's kind of where I've been at.
Well, I don't blame you. I feel the same way. I did the same thing. So yeah. I guess Smashbox users and Goomwave users, leave your comments, leave your defenses.
Yeah. Realistically, it's just Smash Brothers and it's esports and all this stuff. I just try to say the truth, and hopefully people see it. That maybe they disagree with me or whatever, but I'd rather say my opinion on it and hold to it.
Yeah, that's why I thought you were the perfect guest, because you're based Blur. You're the one person who I've always felt like, even if people aren't thrilled with what he'll say it. And, I don't think that's as common as you think.
Yeah, man. I mean, I just think that when it's not convenient, saying what you think is right is important. And sometimes, you can be wrong in that process. You can say the wrong thing, but at least people will, tell you, and you'll change your mind, rather than just, holding the opinion and, not saying it because you're worried of what people will think, and then you won't get to the truth. I care about the truth, basically. It's the whole... I care about the integrity of getting to the right solution in the end.
Well, I appreciate you suffering through my grilling process, and you've been an amazing guest. This has been a great time for me. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast / videocast, because there'll be video too. Where can people find you? What are you up to? What should people be paying attention to before I let you head out?
Yeah, we talked about Smash a lot in this, but I am a gamer of many types. I'm mostly known for Smash, obviously. You can go on @Oxy_Crimson. That's my Twitter. I try not to be on other social media because I don't want to be. And yeah, so you get it. But I like other games too. I'm big into fighting games. I play a lot of single player games. I'm known for strategy games too. So Slay the Spire is like the one.
If
Brood
I
Wars,
ever
I'm a
bring
huge
him
fan.
back, maybe I'll have to grill you on Brood War next because I'm a big fan of that as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good games out there, and I'm just, happy to meet a new community, and I'm excited because shmups are the genre which I haven't really gone down and explored.
That's awesome.
Relatively, I think most of the gaming world I've explored at least a little bit. I still have to beat a lot of games. There's so much out there, but shmups I'm so inexperienced, and so I'm excited to learn it, and hopefully in a few years you'll look back and be like, hey, he did beat all those games.
Hell
And
yeah.
I'll try. So yeah.
I have faith in you.
That'll be fun.
Alrighty, adios everyone. So thank you to the $5 patrons, 100 accepting Panda, Admiral Coconut, Arnold, Alexander Pfeiffer, Dingo, Anthony A, Arcade Hell, Arrow Viper, Bean Pit, Bo, Ben, Vito Dames, Borgie22, Brian Romano, Ryan Shiver, Bush and Cat, Chase Palumbo, Chadel Maltese, Chris Yusufovich, Chronic Burnout 3, Clara Cliff, Climby Coyote, Coast, Color Boy, Cookstand666, Cooks and Soup, Corey Mark, Des Audio, Dan Chi, Darren Griffin, Dave Hansen, David Crespo, Delta Tango 6, Disco Stas Leia, DJ420 Praise It, Elias, FCK, Frames Per Human, Francisco, Full Set, Retro Schmupper, Hausu, Jake Ryan, JLab, JB RPG, John Kelly, Game Boy Guru, K, K2, Kilo Reedy, Contain, Praise the Boys, K-Horse, Low Casting, Malaise, Matt O'Leary, Maz, Megadeth 859, Minong, Mecklin, Michael McCord, Mitchell Y, Queen Charlene, Nathaniel Davis, Neon Dagger Games, Oakland Kugels, Oxated, Pedro, Philip Mason, Psycho Blizzard, Rattlecat, Raul, Real Skeen, Riff Mason, Rolf015, Scanline City, Seesaw FW, Shmup Junkie, Sarah Pong, Steve Fiction, Street Magic, Superpunk, SW1335, Demzarian, Takara Mucho, Taze, The Boot Rex, The Dirty Screech, The N1, The Old Bensta, TRM, Sugumo, 2YU, Twilight EX, Unikoi Roots, Bog Hog, Vic Viper, Beautiful, Wabby Legs, Utakaya, Zachary Patton, Zeal. Thanks so much, everyone.